Y'all make your way to a seat, please. All seat. Wow, it's amazing how well y'all behave when there's a bunch of justices in the house. I'm going to let you intro. Go ahead.
Hey, it's actually a little bit after 9. If you don't mind making your way to your chairs. We'll ask the doorkeepers if they don't mind to let everyone in and then pull the doors and we'll get started. Welcome to day 3 of the joint 2023 appropriations meetings. Thank you so much again for your attendance. As we've said several times already, this is probably the 1 or 2 bills that will come through our committee, or probably the 2 bills that will affect and most directly touch your constituents. So thank you for being here and being a part of today and really being a part of everything you've already helped with this week. Just to recap a little bit, the first day we ran through some of the issues that you brought up as important. Hoteling of children, moving our healthcare system forward, how we were going to address state liabilities. Remember, we heard over $50 billion in state liabilities in about a 2-hour span. Educating our youth. And then yesterday, as we ran through the committee hearings with the department heads who help run the day-to-day of our state and run the workforce of almost 80,000 employees. Today, our focus is more on public safety. It's our judiciary, the folks who hear the issues that happen across our state and make judgments that are there to keep us safe, as well as others who are devoted to public safety. So we've got quite a full agenda. Appreciate your attendance, and our hope is we can wrap up just a little bit after noon. There we'll roll straight into our CDBG block grant hearings that are required by the federal government. And then, as I understand, Mr. Chairman, you've got your House subcommittee hearings teed up and ready to start almost immediately.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got several subcommittees meeting this afternoon and subcommittees meeting tomorrow. So we're as you know, we're on a rapid schedule toward the end of session, so we have our path and we are moving in that direction.
Well, let me tell you thank you, because while there are so many things going on in this building, you know the budget ends up driving the schedule so much of the time. So the Senate, we can't get to work on it until the House does their work. So thank you so much for your expeditious work to get us a finalized document.
We do, as Chairman Tillery said, we do have a very busy schedule this morning, so when we do get to questions, if you can make them succinct, and I know that attorneys generally like to make money by how long they do talk, maybe we can reverse that today, and you might get awarded in a budget if you don't speak long. So, yeah, I said that, sorry. We'll open up this morning. Chairman Perkle, if you'll open us in prayer.
Bow with me, please. Dear Heavenly Father, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew thy spirit within me. Lord, thank you for the privilege that it is of serving the people of this great state. And help us even now. Give us a servant heart for the people that we represent. Lord, we thank you for prayer, the opportunity we have to make our petitions known to you. And now I ask prayer for the troopers in the hospital this morning. Lord, I pray that you'll grant us wisdom today as we do the people's business. We'll be great stewards of the resources that have been given us. In your name I pray. Amen.
As Chairman Hatchett said, we do have a full morning, and we're starting off with the Supreme Court of our state, the Chief Justice from my neck of the woods down in South Georgia below the Nat line, Chief Justice Michael P. Boggs. Justice, the podium and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Tillery. Thank you, Chairman Hatchett. Chairman Hatchett, since I've been a judge, I'm out of the work by the hour and work by the word, get paid by the word business, but appreciate your comments about lawyers because members of the committee and guests, thank you for the opportunity to be here on behalf of the state's judiciary. This meeting has traditionally been an opportunity for me to expound on, and my predecessors to expound on the challenges that face the state's judiciary. But I first want to thank this committee, both committees, for the great support that they've given to the state's judicial system in enabling us to fulfill our constitutional obligations. As the third branch of government, we're very grateful for what you all do to support us, and you have supported us in the past so well, and I just want you to know we appreciate that on behalf of all of the classes of state courts in the state of Georgia. You've asked us to address and start off with addressing about funding that we might have received in the amended 22 and fiscal year 23 budgets, and kind of briefly update you on the implementation of those funds. I'll speak to the Supreme Court. The amended 22 budget didn't particularly include any new funding for our court, but the 23 budget, which we're in now, did provide 2 positions for the Supreme Court of Georgia that were sorely needed. Those positions included regulatory positions to help us with our many administrative and regulatory functions we have on the Supreme Court, namely lawyer discipline and judicial discipline. And you were very gracious in providing us funding to provide 2 central staff attorney positions for our court to help us hire people that will gain expertise in state bar disciplinary matters and triage the abundance of cases we get from the state bar every week and every month, but also another position to help us with the Judicial Qualifications Commission matters that we get from the JQC, and sometimes from the investigative panel and sometimes for the hearing panel. But that new system, which has only been around a few years, necessitated really someone with expertise to help us work through that enormous backlog of cases. And so I want to thank you for the funding in the past. Talk briefly about some challenges that we're going to have at our court, and I speak also on behalf of the Court of Appeals when I tell you that the biggest request we're going to have this year, and one that we've included in our amended 23 budget, is a request to help us with basically rewriting the coding that we use on our docket system for the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. That docket system accommodates lawyers' e-filing, which is required in our courts. That docket system is public-facing and allows lawyers to search our docket. That docket allows us, as justices, to work our cases through that docket. The challenge we have, particularly with the coding on our system and the Court of Appeals system, is that coding, which is provided by our network provider, Trevere, is 12 years old. Those of you that understand IT know that 12 years in the IT world is an extremely long time, and that coding is no longer supported by Trevere. And in fact, there is only one person at Trevere in Utah that can support the Court of Appeals and us in writing enhancements to that program. And so as we try to enhance the program to provide better services to our constituents, namely the public and the citizens of Georgia, the lawyers of Georgia, we pay for those services, but there's only one person that can do that for us. And so we're asking in our amended budget for approximately $1.5 million at the Supreme Court, and a number similar to that, a little larger because of the needs at the Court of Appeals, to support rewriting that coding so that it is supportable for enhancements that we will be asking for in the future. And I will tell you that during the pandemic, you should know that your Court of Appeals and your Supreme Court did not slow down. We did not delay cases. You all know that we have a constitutional obligation to decide our cases within 2 terms of court. We have 3 terms a year. The terms at our court and the Court of Appeals are the same. And roughly that means for litigants, for citizens, that if you have a case before the Court of Appeals or a case before the Supreme Court, you will get a decision no later than about 7 months. Now that seems like a long time, but I'd suggest to you that that's probably the fastest in the country because no other state has that requirement. I have friends that litigate in other states, Florida included, where they're waiting years for decisions by their appellate courts, and finality and closure is important to business litigants, it's important to criminal defendants, it's important to people that have business before our courts. So we didn't shut down, but that docket, which really deals with everything from the transmission of electronic records from the trial courts to mandatory reporting forms, indexes related to the publication of the Reporter of Decision, decisions and the official Supreme Court and Court of Appeals opinions is vital, that it be operational and that it be capable of being enhanced with the needs of our court. So in any event, if it's not upgraded, I would suggest to you that that language is going to be less effective in the future. We're going to be adversely impacted. Specifically, we're not going to have the ability to install critical safety patches that are needed to keep our system safe, and we won't be able to upgrade the system to meet our operational needs. So that's essentially what we're going to be asking for at subcommittee meetings relative to the needs of the Supreme Court in the amended budget. I want to talk a little bit about the judiciary writ large in Georgia. You all know that since COVID hit, we've had significant delays in getting trials in our trial courts at all levels, and not just trials, but hearings in all of the courts across the state of Georgia. You know that because of the need to address serious violent felony cases, that Governor Deal put together American Rescue Plan Act funds and appropriated, committed, if you will, not appropriated, but committed approximately $96 million to the judicial branch to fund trial courts in their efforts to remediate these serious violent felony case backlogs. I want to bring you up to speed on kind of where we are on that. So that $96 million was not for public defenders. They had separate money provided to them through OPB. But the money that we got went to the Judicial Council. I set up a committee. I'm chairing the committee that deals with the appropriating those funds to respective applicants across 50 judicial circuits in Georgia. So far in calendar year 22, the committee awarded over $44 million in grants to 42 of 50 judicial circuits. Those funds were calendar-based, so they expired at the end of 22. We knew from the start that circuits would need time to be able to use those funds in an efficient way in their respective circuits in your own jurisdictions, namely because those funds were limited to temporary personnel and temporary space. And hiring temporary personnel, you've heard a lot about workforce development and challenges across the state in areas of hiring people. The judiciary is not immune. Across the state, we've had challenges in hiring assistant district attorneys with these funds. We have the money, but hiring folks has been extraordinarily difficult, Daugherty County, for example, I think at full measure we'll have about 14 ADAs in Albany, Georgia. They're down to 6. And as a result, that definitely impedes their ability to move their serious violent felony cases or all of their felony cases that are in superior courts. But you should know that we did allow and grant $44 million in funds for that calendar year that just expired. I'm here to tell you that by the time that all of the reimbursements are come in from calendar year 22, your circuits, 42 of the 50 judicial circuits, will have spent a little over $10 million of those funds, which is about what we expected. So they are putting the money to good use. With respect to calendar year 23, which we've just now entered, we asked courts in the nature of accountability, because I think it's important that when we spend that kind of money, we make sure that we're getting a return on that investment. We asked our courts to tell us what impact they're having on the implementation of those funds. A couple data points that I'll share with you. After seeing a 36.3% increase in pending serious violent felony cases between 2019 and 2021 across the state, these calendar year 23 grantees reported a 11.55% decrease in these pending cases between the end of 21 and August of 22. And there was a similar decrease, you should know, seen among all felony cases and all cases in general. So our judges are being very diligent, working very hard, and I applaud them for using these funds and really working hard to move their case backlogs. With respect to jury trials, after seeing a 75.3% decrease in felony jury trials between 2019 and 2020, these jury trials increased by 182.7% by the end of 2021, and by another 13.5% over the first 8 months of 2022. So your judges, notwithstanding the challenges of COVID and notwithstanding in rural parts of the state the challenges with space and the challenges with bringing grand jurors in for presentments, and with regard to the challenges of bringing in panels of 60 or 100 jurors at a time to pick a jury for criminal jury trials, they've done very well, I think, in ramping back up, and we attribute a lot of that to the funding that the governor and OPB and the legislature was willing to afford. Now we're in the second year of a 3-year grant program that will expire next year. I'm here to tell you that we've received applications for this calendar year from 37 of the 50 judicial circuits. The committee met in November. We awarded $39 million to these 37 circuits, which was effective January 1st of this year. We expect to accept applications again from these circuits for another open period in April. So your ARPA money, I think, is being put to good use. I'm making sure that your circuits are being accountable in how they spend those funds. I applaud the Judicial Council and AOC for staffing the committee that I chair. I thank the governor and OPB and this body for allowing us to use those funds so that our judges can fulfill their many constitutional obligations to move cases in this state. Lastly, with that, I also want to say that I support the Administrative Office of the Court's request for funding. They're going to be asking for funding for a variety of things. The Judicial Council is the administrative arm of your courts in this state. They provide a very valuable service to our courts. And I think you get a really good return on your investment. If you ask any of the judges that are served by the AOC, they will all tell you that they're very proud of the services that the AOC, Cynthia Clanton, and her team provide. With that, that's essentially what's going on in the courts in your state. I'm proud to be chair of the Judicial Council and proud to report on behalf of the courts of this state that I think we're in pretty good shape relative to where we've been, and we're moving in the right direction. I hope these funds, which expire at the end of next year, these Treasury funds that have been provided to us through OPB, expire at the end of 24. And so we have another year after this to remediate some of the backlogs, but we're still working on those. I hear from courts regularly. And we appreciate all the support you've given us in that regard. Happy to answer questions, Mr. Chairman, either if you have questions or your members have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. I don't have any questions. We don't have any questions on the board. I think it's a first.
Let me leave before somebody changes their mind.
Mr. Chief Justice, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you all.
He got it with that face of order.
Chairman Hatchett, do you have something that you just received hot off the presses you'd like to announce?
I sure do, Chairman Tillery. If a moment of personal privilege, because as somebody we all know, I am excited to announce that Senator Bo Hatchett is now the new father of little Miss Hope Hatchett, who came in this morning at 7 pounds and 6 ounces, and everybody's doing great. So I have a new great niece.
Chairman Hatchett, it's very obvious that Bo heard the DOAS commissioner's comments yesterday on workforce. I'm amazed at his timing. It was impeccable. Our next presenter will be our Chief Judge from the Georgia Court of Appeals, Brian Rickman. Judge Rickman, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to Bo and Ashley. That's great news.
It's right up in your area, too, there, isn't it?
Right up in my neck of the woods. Ladies, Chairman Tillery, Chairman Hatchett, members of the committee, and guests, I have with me Mr. Chris Walker, our fiscal officer, and Mr. John Ruggieri, our IT director, in addition for any questions that I can't cover. Chief Justice Boggs covered quite a bit that I won't have to put you through again. So I'll go, as I told some of your members, I watched some of the proceedings that you have been going through, which looked like being on a jury for the last 3 days, quite frankly. So I know that by day 3 that my task is not to talk too long. I did want to take a moment to say something about who's not with us. Judge Clyde Reese was our budget chair, passed away at our court. Many of you in this room reached out to us when that happened, and it's very much appreciated. The governor's office moved the flags to half-mast. Many of you knew Clyde in government when he was commissioner. He was just a remarkable, wonderful guy. He was a trailblazer. Clyde and his cousin integrated Pace Academy. He was one of the first African-American students, and he had a big impact on me personally and my ability to learn from him. So I wanted to say thank you for all your kind words, and know that he will be missed, and it's appreciated. How did we spend money from 22? You will see or have seen most of our money was spent on website enhancements, on cybersecurity, and on technology. As mentioned last year, the vast majority of Georgia citizens now interact with us through websites and through our docket system that Chief Justice Boggs already covered. And so we have become very conscious of cybersecurity because we're in a different era now, as you know, that folks can shut us down, can shut the ability of the courts down just with a hack. And so most of our FY22 funds or enhancements were technology enhancements. No positions, but it was technology, technology, technology. Technology is needed, and it's both a way also for systems to interact. When we go to FY23, Chairman and members, a couple things to point out. There is, in the amended 23, we had a number of $83,000 that we had requested for our cyber insurance premiums. That can be, I was always told when you had good news to lead with that, that can be zeroed out. Because we had a good audit on our multi-factor authentication and all of our cyber procedures, we came in well under those premiums. So that 83 can actually be zeroed out. A few things, everything Chief Justice Boggs said about that docket system, I echo. It is the central nervous system of our entire court. One quick thing I want to point out, not just about the fact that it's antiquated and we need to update it, but I always try to think about what is our ultimate goal. For those of you who are attorneys or who participate in the system, one of the biggest delays in appellate justice is the transmission of the record. So the transcripts have to be typed up, the exhibits have to be put together, and that record has to be docketed at our court, and you can see months and months. Part of the technology that you're seeing, I think the vision that most all of us, you included, have for the system is we need to reach the point where our trial court clerks, first of all, if you have digital transcripts, those things are uploaded. If you have digital evidence, that's uploaded in a format. And rather than hard copies, we're reaching the point where if a citizen appeals to one of our courts, it's a matter of clicking on the mouse and transmitting that entire record electronically. We have had great success with that. We still have a long way to go, but part of our infrastructure is geared toward that ultimate goal, and that will further decrease, we hope, delays. For those of you who are practitioners, our Superior Court folks can answer this. There is a rule pending, I'm not sure if it's already been passed, that is a big deal if you're a law nerd like me, which is litigants are going to be required to tender digital evidence, be that a dash cam video, be that a video of a slip and fall, in a format. Part of the problems we've had in the past is just we get these things in formats that are not immediately readable. There's going to be a uniform way to tender that, a uniform format, so that hopefully from cradle to grave, from the time it's tendered in a courtroom, it goes along the system digitally and can be immediately accessed. Clerks are not having to copy DVDs and things of that nature. That's, I think, where the world's headed. That's where we're headed in Georgia, and we hope to get there. And our docket system is a big part of that. The last thing I'll say about it, it is a custom, both the Supreme Courts and our system are very custom, tailored to Georgia courts and Georgia law. We have always had discussions about whether we could save money with an off-the-shelf product, and the short answer is you don't save money, and it actually doesn't serve Georgia as well because it's tailored around Georgia law, Georgia deadlines, Georgia dates, terms, all those sorts of things. You will see in the 23 and 24 budget, we're asking the total project cost from Trevere for us is $1.8 million. You'll see a $900,000 figure in the FY24 budget. That's there if you do choose, we hope, to appropriate the money. That, of course, that's there because if you made the choice to appropriate half this year, half next year, if we get the whole amount, Trevere can staff up and get to work immediately, and they've given us about a 12 to 18 month time frame to rewrite all that code. Why are we asking for it now? Our decision to come to you now is based on making hay while the sun's shining, as my dad used to say. And the last thing you want us to do, I think, is show up in a recession or a down year and start telling you we have a critical infrastructure project that if you don't fund it, our whole system's going to collapse tomorrow. So that's why we're here. And then finally, there are some items on there that you see that we label enhancements. These are just things we're excited about trying to do. Adding electronic transfer of cases between the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, for example, is a part of that vision that I told you about. The last thing that I will say, appreciate what you do. I was joking with my staff that when we sit over at the beautiful building that you gave us, we get to ask lawyers questions and they're on the spot. I think it says something beautiful about the institutions we're all a part of, that there are no kings and emperors, then we have to come over here and answer your questions and humble ourselves. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and I'm proud to be a part of it, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Judge Rickman. You had a lot of questions after that last comment. All joking aside, there are no questions on the board. Does any member have any other question? Thank you again for your thorough presentation. Our next guest is Judge Arthur Smith. He's the judge in Muskogee County, but he is also the president of the Council of Superior Court Judges and is speaking on behalf of Superior Court judges this morning. Judge, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be here. Gentleman Chairman and members of the committee, I am Art Smith. I am the president of the Council of Superior Court Judges. And this morning I drove over from Athens, leaving our 200 and some odd judges there in conference, and we'll return after our presentation this morning. The fortunate thing about being the third judge to speak is that so much has already been said by our Chief Justice and our Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals, and I will not take time unnecessarily to repeat that, but the overarching theme is that the courts in Georgia did not close during the pandemic. We just did court in a different fashion. We learned to sit and look at a monitor and speak to lawyers who were in their offices or their homes, and to hear from pro se litigants who likewise were in some off-premises location. I began our presentation by telling you that for the amended FY23 budget, we are not using $43,375 that was granted to us previously, so that's a return to the state. This year, we are returning or not using $350,678 due to the performance of the judicial retirement system, which allows the employer contribution to the JRS to decrease from 8.3 to 6.9%, resulting in a savings, as I said, of about $350,000. Now, on the ask side, we are asking for $210,400 for the South Georgia Circuit, for the Blue Ridge, a like amount for the Blue Ridge Circuit, and the same amount for the Mountain Circuit, to annualize the cost of the new judgeships created in House Bill 56 during the 2022 legislative session. Our Judicial Workload Committee of the Judicial Council has recommended the creation of 3 new judgeships. Based on the empirical data that committee looks at from year to year to determine the need for new judgeships, there were more than 3. There were approximately 10 who met the criteria, but it's been our tradition to seek funding for 3 judgeships at a time. And we are seeking $428,138 for the creation of a new judgeship in the Daugherty Circuit, the Coweta Circuit, and the Atlantic Circuit. Part of the way that we have been able to keep the court open is through the use of senior judges, some through the appropriations of this body. In the 2020 legislative session, our senior judge funds were reduced by $1,875,000, or 94% of the total budget. Now, additional funding was provided in FY22 and FY23 to provide senior judges at the current level, which is 9 senior judges per active judge. Our request this year is for $834,238 to restore 6 additional senior judge days per active judge. The career path for a judicial secretary or judicial assistant, as we call them, is the step increase that's periodically earned. It currently tops out at 21 years. We have a number of judicial assistants who have been in the service of the state of Georgia in that capacity for more than 21 years. And in order to recruit and retain the quality people that we seek, and we're fortunate to currently have, we're asking for the creation of a 6th step for those assistants, for those who reach 21 years or more. The cost of doing this would be $691,231. Another group of hardworking people in the trial court level are the court reporters, the certified court reporters. Each judge has the authority to name one official court reporter. Those individuals receive a travel and a contingency fund payment each month. That hasn't been adjusted since 1993, and we're asking for $496,230 to bring those up to more realistic levels for these individuals. Those of you who work with the courts frequently know that court reporters are in very short supply, and this would be one way that we could enhance their compensation, use it as a tool to recruit new people to go into court reporting and to retain those who have been doing that over the years. So the total request in the judges program for the budget for the coming year is $3,496,025. As you know, there are 3 budgets under the Council of Superior Court Judges. The judges' budget, of course, is the largest part. There is a budget for the district court administrators who do the back office work for the courts, and there's also a budget for the Council of Superior Court Judges central office. For the district court administrators budget, we're asking for an enhancement of $12,959 to allow the secretaries for the district court administrators to have a 6th step in their career path as well. Thank you for allowing us to present. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Judge John Morse from Chatham County, Savannah, who is the president-elect of the council, and we'll have the pleasure of presenting to this group next year, and also our financial officer, Mr. Charles Miller, who is here. And now, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Or if not, I'll retake the seat.
You have one question.
Yes, sir.
Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Smith, what an honor it is to see you here in Atlanta, Georgia, representing Muskogee County, the Chattahoochee Circuit, the best circuit in the state. So thank you, sir, for your service.
Well, congratulations on your new arrival here at the Capitol.
Yes, sir. Don't I look new? But I wanted to ask you, sir, as a follow-up question. You mentioned the 3 judges, the new judges that's needed for Daugherty, the Coweta Circuit, and Atlanta. Will the number that you asked for also cover the impact that it's going to have of bringing in that new judge, any additional help that's needed in the Superior Court Clerk's office or the admin staff for that. I heard you talk about admin, but I wasn't sure if it covered that as well.
This covers the cost of adding the judgeship, the judge's judicial assistant, and law clerk. This body has been gracious to provide law clerks for all of our judges, so all of our judges, if they don't actually have their own law clerk, have access. That's a good question, Representative Reese. The clerk of Superior Court is funded by the county. In our case, in Columbus, we're a consolidated government, so those funds would come from the consolidated government of Columbus.
Thank you for the clarity.
Yes,
thank you.
thank you.
Judge, there's no further questions. We'd be remiss though if we didn't point out one of the helpers you have in the back, Miss Deborah Nesbitt. Deborah, we're glad to see you made it up here today with us, and I just want you to know we really appreciate you, and we're all praying for your continued health and recovery, so it's great to see you.
Thank you, Chairman Tillery, for recognizing Ms. Nesbitt, who is our External Affairs Director, and we're very proud to have her working with us and have her here today, and thank you for recognizing her.
So I hope you'll have a good morning. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. We're about 20 minutes ahead of schedule, and allow the next group to get ready to present.
You'll begin making your way to the podium. We're still 15 minutes ahead of schedule, which is great, and we're not going to slow down. I see Pete, and I saw Mr. Holloman earlier. Members, if you don't mind going ahead and making your way back to your seats, we're 15 minutes ahead of schedule, which means you can be 15 minutes ahead getting home this afternoon. Thank you all for making your way back in. Our next presentation is actually joint in nature. As you know, last year the House and Senate both worked on issues concerning the criminal data exchange, where we had issues that had been presented to us from our courtrooms where judges did not have information readily available for them making decisions concerning bonds and other important decisions related to public safety. The Senate had two bills, Senate Bill 418 and then Senate Bill 441, that were set to address this matter. The House was kind enough to go along with the passage of one of those, and now today we've asked the folks tasked with helping us implement the criminal data exchange to talk about its status, let us know the progress we've made, let them know that we're still very interested in the topic, as it really truly relates to the safety of our citizens. The Executive Director of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, Mr. Pete Scandalakis, as well as the Executive Director of the Council of Superior Court Clerks, Mr. Mike Holloman. You guys have the floor. Thank y'all so much for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to address this joint session, this joint committee on appropriations, and bring you up to date on what we've been doing with the CDX board. I will tell you that the CDX board has been hard at work. We've had a number of meetings since the bill was passed and signed into law. Our committee is comprised of judges, clerks, sheriffs, police chiefs, court administrators, and all of us are looking at what is going on with criminal dispositions in the state of Georgia. And as you heard testimony last year, as you heard evidence last year, we have a problem with missing dispositions. One of the things we dug into is why are there so many missing dispositions? We did find out that some of the missing dispositions are within what is called the statute of limitations, obviously. That is, a person who's been arrested on a felony. That case will go in as an arrest. However, there may not be a disposition on that case for 2 or 3 years. The other thing that we found out, and we've had some very robust communication, some discussions about how did we get to where we are today and how do we fix it. And there are so many players involved, and I don't know if y'all know how complicated this is. Obviously, you have 159 clerks, you have 159 sheriffs, you now have 50 district attorney's offices, you have a number of solicitor general's offices. You also have the problem with municipalities that also contribute to GCIC. You also have part-time solicitor generals who may be dismissing cases and who do not have access to the same computer information that we have. So you have all these parties involved who are at some point contacting or sending data into GCIC. And under as we track an arrest, not only does GCIC track the arrest through fingerprints, but we also track the counts. For example, if a person is arrested for a murder charge and the DA decides to add a felony murder charge, an armed robbery charge, and an assault charge. And that was not part of the arrest, that the person was just arrested for murder. When that case is disposed of and the clerk takes a sentence, and let's just say the defendant ends up pleading to the murder charge, and the DA dismisses the armed robbery, the felony murder, and the assault charge, if the DA has not indicated that he or she has added those counts, that information that the clerk sends, a disposition, now this is a lawful disposition from the clerk to GCIC, goes in as a murder, but GCIC might reject that because it doesn't have the additional counts. And we're trying to determine, or we've come to the conclusion that we didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of this overnight, but we've made tremendous inroads. We've adopted the standards. We've met the timetable that the House and the Senate have established for the standards. Those standards were adopted on January 9th, and January 10th, and will be distributed to the district attorneys and solicitor generals and the clerks. We still have work to do, and we continue to do it. One thing we've noticed is, and we've talked about training, is GCIC, and I think you should maybe consider this. GCIC probably could use additional personnel and some resources to help train clerks and DAs and solicitor generals and also municipal court clerks into entering dispositions. We've also talked about changing the process that GCIC operates under, and GCIC has been cooperative with that, and we continue to work at that. But we've been doing yeoman's work with a number of different parties involved, and as y'all know, when you're dealing with judges, chiefs, sheriffs, DAs, there are not a lot of quiet people in that room. Everybody has an opinion, and we all try to take everyone's suggestions and opinions into account. I will also say part of the mandate that you gave us in the Senate was to recommend an automatic victim notification system. Now, I will tell you, trying to come up with an automatic victim notification system for 159 sheriffs in less than a year is a very difficult task for a committee to take on, particularly a committee where everybody has a full-time job that they must, deal with every day. We have made a recommendation based upon Sheriff Freeman's input, Sheriff Fulton County's input, but we've also figured out that CJCC, at the same time that we were asked to make a recommendation as to what should be pursued, CJCC was also working on almost an identical matter. So we've kind of brought in CJCC to help us with this automatic victim notification system. I will remind you, this automatic victim notification system is only when a person is arrested and makes bond. And from that point on, the case really goes to either the DA or the Solicitor General, which the victim notification for court hearings, bond hearings, preliminary hearings, trials, and things of that nature, we still have work to be done on that nature. But that's where we are now. I'll have Mike talk a little bit more in detail about it, and I will stay here for some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pete has done an excellent job of summarizing sort of the top-level view of the problems that are inherent in a criminal data exchange process. He mentioned arrest through disposition. That's the cycle that we're trying to. During that cycle, there are 5 distinct segments. There's 5 distinct segments through that. And I have a slide, but I'll be glad to share any of these materials with those of you who might like to get into it a little deeper. It is a very, very complicated. Here are the 5 segments: arrest, charging court, prosecutors, trial court, and then even corrections. Every one of these segments involves multiple agencies. In fact, he alluded to how many there are. You know how many of the elected officials. There are approximately 3,000 entities that have reporting ability into the GCIC criminal system. 3,000. And I think you can imagine the turnover among a lot of those. We all know clerks have deputy clerks turnover, DAs certainly have ADAs who come and go. So it's not a one-shot thing. We can't do a big push this year and educate and alert everybody to the thing and then forget about it, because it'll just come right back at us. I would add that while I don't disagree that GCIC could stand to step up their training, but GCIC looks at the world rightly and understandably so from the state's perspective, from what their needs are. How it works across the grassroots part of this network, maybe not so much. I think that's one of the reasons that I read into Senate Bill 441, that you've sort of refocused what was previously called the CJIP effort from sort of a top-level view to down where Pete and I live. And look at this from our perspective, and I can guarantee you we see it differently than the state does. In fact, that's been one of the challenges that the board has faced, is balancing what GCIC wants in terms of reconciling these original arrest charges as it moves through indictment and then ultimately through a conviction in a court. They want that process to happen, and I'm sure it's helpful to them. But the fact of the matter is, because of that requirement, legitimate, accurate criminal disposition data is not being accepted into the CCH, the criminal history system. And we have our latest iteration of the standards basically say, GCIC, we understand your objectives with your system and why you want to reconcile these charges, but the fact is you've got to take the disposition. I mean, once there's been a disposition, those arrest charges don't mean anything. And in fact, they ought to be removed from the background check history, because the focus is often on what judges can't see or what we can't see in terms of a legitimate. But once a disposition is done and these arrests sit there, many of them now over a decade, it hurts people, innocent people, who go for a license or a job and they get a hit on an arrest because they have this pending arrest sitting out there. We've got to reconcile that. The clerks offered, well, first let me give you a background. We have been transmitting, when I say we, originally the authority, the Clerk's Authority was tasked in 2000 with Senate Bill 50 to serve as a conduit, a hub for clerks to transmit electronic data. That's because in 2000 there weren't many networks around. It wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. So we had sort of an existing real estate statewide network, and we glommed onto that to transmit this data. Currently, still 20 years later, and this includes from 2007 when this CCH system that required all of this coordination and cancellation came into effect, we're right now reporting for over 200 courts, this today, 30,000 histories a month. And we use that template as a offer early on to try and meet GCIC's needs by tracking everything that came through this hub, expanding it to include DAs and law enforcement, and then we could literally track an arrest from the moment it happens all the way through, and we could be feeding that data to the appropriate agencies. We want to I particularly want to continue to talk to the committee about that proposal. Again, also, I would emphasize that training needs to happen from the grassroots as well as from GCIC and what they require. I don't know, do you have the slide that says slide 3? It's a chart. The
third tab up there at the top. Types of seats.
Oh, okay, I can control that. Thank you. I know you can't see this chart, but you can see that each bar has a number of different colors. Each of those colors represents one of the significant reasons for a disposition to be rejected. I'll summarize this by saying 60% of rejections of legitimate case disposition data are due to the misalignment of the original counts, count 1, count 2, and the ultimate count 1, count 2 as it's adjudicated by a court. There are all of these other charts we get rejections based on differences of opinion about who's eligible for first offender. A lot of times GCIC will
Mr.
look in there.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I just watched the faces of the committee go, huh? So I understand that. Do you mind explaining what you mean by that alignment of counts?
Pete alluded to it earlier. When an arrest is made, an arresting officer says, these are what I'm taking you to jail for. Count 1, count 2, count 3. And it could be assault, having a firearm by a felon, all of these things. When Pete's folks get a hold of it, they say, well, I like this charge better than this charge, so I'm going to elevate the charge 3 that the police did. I'm going to elevate that to count 1. And therein, when those don't match up, when we send in, when the court, the clerk of Superior Court and state court sends in our disposition, if somebody hasn't logged into GCIC and said, oops, change count 1 to count 3 and count 3 to count 1, then it's rejected. And each of those colors represents a defect that's not in the disposition. I want to emphasize there's 9 times out of 10, there are faulty dispositions, don't get me wrong, nobody's perfect, but the vast majority of reasons for rejection are one of these other reasons. And that's what we've got to get a handle on. Right now, the current standards document basically says, GCIC, you just got to take this disposition data and you've got to get it in there. How they're going to tackle the second piece of that, which is addressing these outstanding arrest charges that now have been resolved, we'll see. So the work of the board is not done. I don't think they like the current version. There's a lot of discussion to go. We really have had, I'll bet this CDX board has had 50 times the number of meetings and discussions as the previous 3-4 years of its existence. I want to thank Pete for agreeing to chair. And with that, I think, Mr. Chairman, I'll bring it to a close.
We've got a couple of questions. I want to start you off with one, though. I hear you on the dispositions, and I agree with you that affects life. It affects if you're applying for a CDL or so many other different things. One of the things I may be speaking out of turn for the members is we're concerned as much, if not possibly more, about the entry and it going in the first place. That's what we're hearing back from judges of, I didn't know this gentleman was arrested or this lady was arrested 2 weeks before for armed robbery. So when she came in to me on some other simpler charge, I bonded her out. Is there any work or any data or anything you can tell us about the entry side or maybe why things aren't getting entered?
Well, the entry side, of course, is law enforcement, and that's the opposite end of the trail from where I sit. It's my understanding that, and we're talking about fingerprintable offenses in the GCIC system. It's only fingerprintable offenses. So a fingerprintable offense obviously involves fingerprints. There's a form called an OBTS, we call it OBITS form, that is transmitted usually automatically from the machine that takes the prints that the law enforcement. There is an issue of charges that get upgraded later, so there were never any fingerprints done at the arrest because originally they weren't fingerprintable offenses, and then later when Pete's folks get a hold, they raise the level of the charges they become. and there's been a real breakdown in sending that offender, that defendant, back to get a fingerprintable offense. Because, and let me tell you, once they get through court, if they walk out the door, you're not going to get them back to do fingerprints. I would suggest that you talk to law enforcement and GCIC about that system, the live scan. I think they call it live scan. But that's opposite end of the conduit for me. I just know what I've heard.
Judge Gunner.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I appreciate what you're trying to explain here, and it's hugely complicated. One question I've had, and I'm not sure that this relates to it as much, but have we ever defined what a case is?
Well, that's a question that revolves around the judges, as you well know, being a former Superior Court judge. We're not so much involved in a discussion about what is a case. I think that relates more to the judges' attempts to do case counts, accurate case counts, so that when they come to this same committee and ask you for new judgeships or whatever, they want to be able to quantify why they're asking that. But we haven't done a lot of discussion around defining a case. To us, we're interested in charges.
Okay, I didn't know if that would help the process, because the people on the back end of it that are getting that information from the sheriffs and DAs, they don't understand the system either. They need to be educated in order to know.
I mentioned 3,000 entities. Nobody understands this very well, and certainly Pete and I have been in the deep water for years, and it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
All of this is really, really complicated.
I totally understand. When I first became DA, the first thing my clerk in Lumpkin County did was take me into a room full of file drawers. They were all arrest warrants that had not been disposed of, and wanted me to. And they went back decades. I mean, back into the 60s.
I've heard of disappearing warrants. Warrants is another thing. The hub that I described, if it could be expanded, statute says that the clerk shall be given a copy of the warrant. That doesn't happen in many, many, many counties. And that's a problem. It's not directly related to GCIC because they don't need the warrant. But we do. And that's another aspect of this hub that I'm talking about developing. It not only serves the purpose of helping clear up these charges and the alignment of them and getting disposition data, it serves many other purposes. It could, for instance, be a conduit for the courts to get case data. It could serve a lot of purposes. And again, too many to go into from this podium, but if anyone would like to have a deeper dive into this, I'm available, of course, anytime.
Chairman Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Work that you all do. We'll have a little microphone problems here. Question, I'm always concerned when we start talking about an additional system when we have ones in place for the state. There's an order of kind of people, process, and technology. And they go in that order intentionally, because if you don't have the right people who are trained doing the right process, it really doesn't matter what technology you have. And in some of the comments about legitimate data, I guess my question would be is, I'm not aware, maybe you are, of a specific charge that may have been entered in times past that has been rejected. Usually what I've seen in working with our friends and law enforcement and the courts is it ends up having a problem within the courts themselves that are not following some of those issues and challenges. So I want to make sure what we're doing is not a solution in search of a problem, as opposed to getting back and utilizing the tools that we have today.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Holloman. Usually, I stand on the other side of Pete's people as a public defender or as a criminal defense attorney, and sometimes I stand on the same side when I represent victims. But would you agree with me that the lack of a corrected charging database leads to an incredible waste of judicial and other law enforcement resources, such that when charges are not resolved, people cannot get bonds because the DA standing in the courtroom along with the defense attorney sees this GCIC printout and can't tell what disposition there has been. If somebody was charged with murder, but the client is telling you, no, I was only convicted of simple battery, that means that's a big difference between whether this person's going to get a bond or not. Additionally, if they really were convicted on simple battery, they would be entitled to a bond. It could have been a false arrest. Of course, if they were not being truthful with their lawyer and they were really convicted of murder, then no, they probably shouldn't be out on bond, and the judge needs to know that, which results then in continuation of hearings, which results in corrections having to bring this person back and forth, DAs having unnecessary hearings, judges having unnecessary hearings, and paying public defenders, whether they're on the clock as the private appointed or county-based, again and again and again for something that should have been resolved by a simple entry.
Yeah, I agree with you, and let me tell you why. Speaking for the Superior Court clerks, do you know where the people who run into these problems go when it happens? 9 times out of 10, they don't go to Pete's folks, they don't go to the judges, they go to the counter at the clerk's office and they say, I've got a problem. That's why it is so high on our radar, because we are where those people go when they have run into one of the many problems that you just mentioned. Sure, Pete.
Real quickly, just so y'all understand, this is a problem of getting the data to GCIC. It's not that GCIC inputs this data. It's the clerks, the DAs, making sure we have readable fingerprints and get those charges too. So it really is, we have a process in place. It really is a matter of educating everybody to do not only their job, but a little bit beyond their job to make sure everything gets done right. And GCIC can break out reports to us to let us know, okay, this is where we're seeing problems, this is where we can make corrections. So I think that's what we're emphasizing on. It is a number of different factors that are coming into play here.
You know, to amplify that, currently, if you go on to the GCIC website, they show a value. It's a pie chart, and it shows the number of the percentage of successful dispositions, the number that were rejected, and it's like a 3-piece pie chart. In Fulton County, there's one score. In Fulton County, there are 4 layers of courts. There are 15 municipalities, including Atlanta, who generate an order of tens of thousands of more reports than the Superior Court clerk and the Superior Courts down here in Fulton County. I know everybody focuses on felonies and serious charges, but we're talking about thousands and thousands of lower level misdemeanor assaults, DUIs, and they cloud the picture. Not that they're not important, but it makes it extremely hard to know where to apply the training, or identify where is the problem, because all you've got is this one number. And again, we can, with the hub that we've been maintaining for now 20 years and the one that we've proposed, we can break that down to each of the 3,000 ORIs individually, or by class of court, or by municipality. We've got to be able to, you can't really apply training and enforcement in an effective way if you don't know where the problem is. And we don't have the tools right now. Now, we've asked GCIC, and we hope that maybe they'll improve their error reporting so that we can, as a board, go, well, oh, here's, we're spending all of our time talking to this group, and they're really not the problem. It's these folks is where we need more training. And I'll guarantee you it'll be those agencies where they have a huge amount of turnover. Probation, I won't hazard a guess who has the highest turnover, but you get the idea. A lot of lower paid jobs are going to turn over, and therefore somebody comes in, they put you in front of a computer and say, go to work. And they have no idea about all of this stuff.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the discussion about the database issues, and I'm aware of that in other contexts to include the legally owed DNA of whether or not everybody that owes DNA is putting it in to help solve cases as well. I know that that's not directly under PAC's purview, but certainly that information is helpful to prosecutors. But the questions that I want to ask are, one, yesterday, the Attorney General talked about retention issues within his agency and that he's losing some lawyers to local prosecutors' offices. Can you talk about the challenges that you all may have, if any, and I think you mentioned it, Pete, of the retention, and particularly remind us of the starting salaries and then the salaries at, say, 5 years and 10 years for prosecutors. And then the last thing I'd like to have a very quick explanation about is on page 74, there's about $5 million ad for personal services for one victim advocate in each judicial circuit. If you could tell us just a little bit about the roles that those victims advocates play. Thanks.
I will be glad to. I don't have my numbers in front of me because obviously we're going to present that in the big budget hearing. But most DA's office, well, first of all, as y'all know, you passed a constitutional amendment that requires the district attorneys and solicitor general, the solicitor generals to make sure that victims are afforded their rights during the court process. There are no state-paid victim advocates, and most of the offices have their victim advocates either paid at the local level or through VOCA grants. And as you all well know, anyone that's sat on in the committees that's listened to CJCC, the federal government has slowly been cutting back on the amount of money to VOCA grants. And we've been making cuts, not in personnel, but wherever we could to make sure that we keep our personnel in place. The victim advocates do a lot. They do a yeoman's amount of work. And I can say that because I started in 1984. I know I don't look that old, but I started in 1984 as an assistant DA, and we had 0 victim advocates. By the time I left the DA's office in 2018, after being DA for 25 years, I had employed 8 victim advocates for our 5 counties, as well as some additional support personnel. They do everything from notify victims of what they're entitled to by way of compensation through the CJCC Compensation Board. They do everything from notifying them of preliminary hearings, of bond hearings, of court dates, of their rights as a victim to either talk to a defense attorney or not talk to a defense attorney if they elect not to. Now, I counseled my prosecutors, do not tell victims not to talk to defense attorneys. We can be present and we can listen, but the defense attorney has a right to talk to you. But they do a tremendous amount of work. They make sure the victims get the counseling. And the reason we're asking for that amount of money is to have one state-paid victim advocate in each DA's office. That's what that $5 million would be for. I don't think did I answer all your questions?
You may not recollect it, but if you have the starting salary, the 5-year mark, and the 10-year marks.
The starting salary, and this was last year. I haven't. In fact, I'm meeting with my budget director in about an hour here because we're scheduled to speak on the amended budget. But the starting salary is around $55,000 for an attorney coming out of law school after college and law school. And at 10 years, you're usually around $80,000. Now, Fulton County has recently upped their starting pay for a brand new prosecutor at about $80,000, which is what it should be. And we're just not able to compete. Where it's particularly hurting us are the circuits outside the urban areas, and those counties that cannot afford county supplements, and also cannot attract people from law school to come work in those circuits. Right now, we're seeing about a 22% vacancy rate in just our prosecution positions, not only because we can't fill those jobs, but because assistant DAs are leaving the rural areas and the areas outside the urban areas to come work for urban DAs' offices. And I don't mind telling y'all, y'all know the tsunami that was caused by COVID and the backlog in trials that we're having. The DAs have approached that with considerable vigor and are moving a number of cases. But we've done that with a lot of help from ARPA, the ARPA grants that the governor gave through the AOC. Those ARPA grants will run out in a couple of years, probably at the end of next year. And those additional personnel will be gone. And we're going to be in a situation where we're still dealing with a tremendous backlog.
Thank you. We've exhausted time. I have one last question for you. What happens when a clerk sees that a criminal history is rejected?
It depends. Sometimes the clerk will go to the DA's office because they know what's happened and it can be resolved. Sometimes it's put on the back burner because they have so much to do that they'll get back to it when they can.
Gotcha. And I did hear your points made quite well, Mr. Holloman, thank you, and Mr. Skandalakis, about, sounds like that really a lot of the things we're talking about we need to be talking about with GCIC as well. So maybe we need to look at where we put things.
Yeah, GCIC is at the table, and we are working well.
Gotcha. Thanks. Thank y'all for your time, and we have some more questions. If folks want to grab folks offline, please do so. We're going to move into our next presentation. Our newest commissioner, the Commissioner of the Department of Corrections, Commissioner Tyrone Oliver. Commissioner Oliver, please make your way to the podium.
Yes, if you don't mind. All right, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Glad to be here.
Good morning.
We're just going to jump right on into it. I know you guys have asked for the instructions of our FY23 funding status. So you can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry.
Members, if you don't mind, please keep your conversations to yourself till you can get out so that Commissioner Oliver can have the room.
You want it? So to provide an update on our funding from FY 2023, we provided funds, this body provided funds to increase the per diem rates for the private prisons in the tune of $4.2 million, which was passed along into the contracts in FY 23. And we increased funds for technology projects promoting offender health, safety, and security in $10 million. And you have, you see there the list of projects that we did with that was various, and that's our telephone monitoring system inside the facility, officer tablets to improve efficiency and safety, and those are working really great. As you all can remember, officer tablets, we were trying to get rid of the paper logs, and so it'll give real-time updates as the officers are making their rounds and making documentations was inside the wire. And also the implementation of the cell phone interdiction, which we had all sites scanned by the end of 2022, December of last year. And so real proud of that. And just kind of give you a little bit of background on that. We've conducted over 126, or right at 126 shakedowns, full shakedowns of our facilities, which resulted in about 8,000 cell phones being confiscated. And along with that interdiction system that we had, we identified and turned off about 1,200 cell phones within the prisons. And so that technology is working very well for us as well. Increased funds for personnel for operation establishments of the offender transportation hubs to the tune of $4.2 million. We still have the interim solution in place until we get all the vehicles in that we ordered. We ordered 80 vehicles, 22 of them are already in, and so we're still picking up from the local prisons and then bringing them down to Jackson. Let me go back. And then we increased funds for capital maintenance and repairs. As you all know, our aging infrastructure has been plaguing us throughout the years, and so that capital maintenance and repairs money was definitely allocated to all projects that we have identified by July of last year, July 31st, 2022. And we have larger projects and that we've already identified, but we have to go through the procurement and purchasing process for that. But they should be starting as soon as we get that process complete. Next in our healthcare program, we're going to go to the amended FY 2023 recommendations. Healthcare programs, you should find out on page 151, increased funds for health pharmacy services contracts and $12.2 million. This increase will help support the new healthcare contract providers, increase in mental health services statewide. These contracts provide more stable cost model and includes electronic health record system being utilized by physical, mental, and our pharmacy vendors. On page 152 in the state prison system, the recommendation is to reduce funds to reflect the closure of Georgia State Prison, about $20.8 million. Provide funds for 33 projects at 19 facilities for emergency repairs and upgrades to life safety security systems and major maintenance renovations in the tune of $51.4 million. Moving on to the FY 2024 statewide recommendations, we do support all these recommendations, by the way. I'm just going to go through this. These cover all of the 11 programs that we have in the statewide recommendations to increase funds to provide a $2,000 cost of living increase across all programs to the tune of $21.8 million. And again, this is really, really good for our employees, not just at GDC, but across the state that it affects, so we can stay competitive with the market rates. Other statewide adjustments is to reflect statewide adjustments in insurance and billing and the merit system. It's $2.2 million. And again, that's going to go across all 11 of our programs. In the admin program, it's recommended in the FY 2024 is to establish 4 new programs within GDC. That's going to be the engineering and construction contract of services, investigation and interdiction, rehabilitation and risk reduction, and food and farm operations. And so you're going to see these transfers out of certain programs into those new programs that were created. And so in the admin budget, we're going to transfer funds out to establish a new program within GDC and to support some of those programs of $5.6 million. We're going to utilize existing funds for annual projections for the state supervised adult offender population in collaboration with the Department of Community Supervision and State Pardons and Parole Board. On page 153, detention centers, again, transferring out $11.4 million to establish and support those new programs that were created. And we're also going to utilize existing funds to establish Correctional Officer 3 rank to enhance our recruitment and retention of critical employees. Let me just talk about that for just a second. As you know, we have Correctional Officer 1 and 2. This is creating a Correctional Officer 3 position, which will provide, of course, some upward mobility for those individuals who are not ready to seek supervisory positions. Again, I think in talking to some of the workforce coming in, they want to see a career track, and this is creating a career track for them, and we're really excited about this program and how it's going to affect our employees as far as retention goes. On page 153, our food and farm program to transfer funds to establish a new sub-program in food and farm. We're going to put that money into that program. As you see, that's $24.8 million, and that's the money that we're transferring in without the statewide adjustments that we talked about. Transfer funds into a new sub-program to maintain the existing operations of the 112-bed Lee Arundel Transitional Center. That's going to be $132,000, and increase funds to reflect the opening of the McRae State Prison System in the tune of $1.1. Next slide. Of $1.1 million. That's going to be our new women's facility down at McRae. Make sure I think I got the wrong slides in here. All right. Next in the food and farm, to continue with, again, we're not going to talk about the Correctional Officer 3, but again, that's going to go across all the programs that affect our COs. Again, on page 153, the health programs to increase funds for the physical health and pharmacy contracts to annualize that, because we'll do it in the amended in the tune of $25.1 million. The offender management program on page 154, transferring funds out to support those new programs is $37.8 million. And then to transfer funds associated with positions from the state prisons to align program budgets with the agency operations at $12.5 million. And just a note on that, that's to move the transportation unit from state prisons to the offender management to consolidate with the transportation hubs. Again, on page 154, it's to increase funds to provide, again, a 2,000 cost of living increase to our private prisons. Again, that's to support them as well, so we can make sure we stay within parity with our private prisons. State prisons on page 154 to reduce funds to reflect the closure of Georgia State Prison in the tune of $20.8 million. And then also in the state prison system to reduce funds to repurpose the Lee Arundel State Prison. We're going to repurpose that, as you already know, to the transitional center in the tune of $18.7 million. And just talk about that for just a second. We're going to repurpose that facility, and over time when we open the McRae Women's Facility, the ladies that are at that prison right now are going to be moving to McRae as soon as we get that opened up. But in Lee Arundel, we're going to maintain the transitional center and hopefully to expand those beds for the transitional center, maintain the fire station there, so to keep that ISO rating within that community, the packing plant, and the RSAT. All employees that are going to be affected will still be, the current employees that we have there will still be employed. No one's going to lose their jobs. We're still going to maintain that facility as a transitional center, so all the employees that we have there currently will still remain employed at that facility to support that new mission. And we will slowly reduce that population once McRae comes online. Continuing with state prisons, of course, to increase the funds to reflect the opening of McRae in the tune of $19.44 million. We're going to increase funds to increase technology projects to improve the safety and security within the prisons. It's 2.6. I'm really committed on technology and making sure that we're using technology to effectively manage our population. And so we're going to utilize this for, again, cell phone interdictions, body scanners, and LPRs across the state at several locations, key locations that we identified based off of intel that we need to up our security measures with that. So that's going to be $2.6 million, going to be well spent to combat that. And again, a transfer some funds out of state prisons is the largest amount we're transferring out to support those new programs at $178.5 million. On page 155, we're going to talk about the transitional center programs. Again, that's a transfer of that money into that program to support that transitional center at Lee Arundel of $2.1 million. And then, of course, you'll see where the Officer 3 rank will come in as well on that. Page 155, to establish a new budget program funding the offender management to align program budgets within the agency operations. That's a $37.7 million, and that's where the county camps were paid, $20 through FY 2022, and in the legislation in 21, it increased to $22 per day, and we're matching that dollar for dollar on that. So, if you have any questions on that, we'll talk about that later. Engineering contracts on page 155 to establish a new budget program. Again, to transfer that money into that budget program, $85.6 million. And then transfer funds associated with the positions from the state prison program to maintain the existing operations of the Lee Arundel Transitional Center of $181,000. And of course, the increased funds to reflect the opening of McRae to support that engineering construction program there. The investigations and interdiction program on 155, that's to establish a new budget program. That's a transfer in of $20.3 million. and the rehabilitation and risk reduction program on page 156, establishing that new program as well of $57.2 million. And continuing with the risk reduction, or rehabilitation and risk reduction program, you can see where we're supporting that program at Lee Arundel as well for $139,000. And then you see the increase of the funds there to open up McRae State Prison. And then going into our obligated bond funds on page 381 is to allow the sale of bonds for emergency repair, sustainment, and equipment statewide of $26 million. Again, with our aging infrastructure and emergency repairs, we have to maintain the prisons around the state. That money is going to be well utilized to maintain that, to maintain our aging infrastructure, and also to allow the sale of bonds to purchase of 231 vehicles statewide of about $11.8 million. No, you asked about several of our federal funding sources, and as you see from this distribution list right here, the list of our federal funding sources, or our funding sources, but just to note, GDC is projecting $2.1 million in federal grant funding, which is only about 0.2% of the total budget based on our FY22 actuals. And I won't bore you with just reading all through that, but those are the list of the programs of the federal grant revenues that we receive. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that completes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I have the team here to help me since it's only 19 days in. So,
thank you, Commissioner. You do have a board that's lit up here, so
I bet.
And I've been listening and watching you and not watching the board, so I don't know who was first. We'll go with Chairman Newton.
Commissioner, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you much for your work and the work that your whole team does keeping Georgia families safe. And I know it's a challenging job, and I appreciate the work you're doing. You mentioned something early on about the cell phone interdiction. I know the Attorney General's task force has visited many areas across Georgia. We've heard, and frankly, in my Augusta area, we just had an inmate who was running a large meth gang out of a state prison. Arrested, which is great. We're getting caught. I'm wondering, do you have what you need on that interdiction? You mentioned, I think, $3 million. You finished a scan of all the facilities in December of 22. Have you ever gone back to one that was scanned 3 months ago and found out that the problem recurs dramatically fast? I mean, the ability to get contraband cell phones in. I'm just wondering, do we have enough funding in there to go back once we've scanned them all and maybe scan some random ones and find out how quickly these things replicate?
That's a good question. I can help get some of the team to help answer that, but I do know that it's going to be a constant battle we're going to continue to face with cell phones coming in. But what I can tell you, though, with the technology we have that's in place and the technology that's coming, we're seeing a reduction of that, and we're also seeing an increase in our shakedowns, which is getting those cell phones out. And so I think with the technology that we have and the technology we're going to bring on board here in the future, you're going to start to see that number decrease. Just to kind of give you an example, in some of the places that we put our drone detection systems in, we're starting to see now, going back to your point, people are not coming back to those prisons flying drones over those prisons because we know that we have those systems in. And so as soon as we can get that technology in across the state, I think you're going to see a drastic number of that attempt to get them in, and then we can start looking at other ways that they're going to try to figure out how to get contraband inside the prisons. But we are seeing that going back, looking at that data.
Not just drug related, but child molesters who've been able to contact their former victims and all. And I appreciate your work on that, and let us know what you need to get it done with the new tech.
Thank you.
Chairman Hubstettler.
Thank you, and you may have the hardest job around here. He got some of my cell phone question answered there, but I know, if I remember right, the federal government rules don't let you block signals going in, which is crazy to me that we can't do that into a jail. But I would say the same thing. We need to be continuously doing this because the communication between gangs on those cell phones is all over the place. So anything you guys can do to repeatedly do this, and anything we can do to change federal rules and actually block the signals, and then it doesn't matter whether we scan or not. But appreciate your work on that. On the per diems for the private prisons, I don't know what they're going to, and I think you said we're at 22 on the on the county work prisons, and you're maintaining that same rate. Is that what you said?
I can have our Chief of Staff, Alan Watson, kind of help me explain that one a little bit better, if you don't mind, Alan. Come on up, Alan.
Go up to the mic.
For the county institutions, that is $22 a day. The per diem rates for the private prison, that varies. So it starts out, there's different ranges, and those ranges will increase on the base range. So currently it's around $42 and some change for the first, let's say, 1,500 offenders. And then for the next group of offenders, let's say 500, that rate drops down, just based on scale, like how many dorms you're using, that kind of thing. Then you go to a third tier, that rate goes back up, and then you go to a fourth tier and the rate goes back down. But the base rate will increase by $1 and some change.
All right. I am concerned on the county prisons. I remember back as a commissioner, they'd gone from $15 to $20 about 20 years ago and really haven't moved much in a long time. And, you know.
Yeah, the $2 increase was in 2021, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dean Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and glad to see you again.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner, I know we are not fully funded in regard to staffing, but it's my understanding that the wardens and the are using non-certified individuals, and by non-certified I'm talking about individuals that work in the store, maintenance workers as correction officers to go in with correction officers on that. And from the individuals that have talked to me, the women especially are very, very concerned about that particular practice. And I just want to see how we can help you in some of this, these practices in that respect. And also, I would like to call your attention to the fact that when parents are trying to find out information about individuals who have been hurt or sick, they can't. And then they call me, and I can get it. But we should be able to deal with those parents, those loved ones, those wives and mothers and fathers about the ones that are incarcerated, because they are very, very concerned. And that's a big issue that I would like for you to look at as we move forward.
Yes, sir, we will.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Al Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your appointment, Commissioner.
Thank you,
and
sir.
I agree with the Senator. You arguably have the hardest job in state government. And that leads to my question. You certainly, your department has not gotten good press over the last 12 months or more. You've had a lot of problems that are kind of high profile. Dual question. The improvement in pay that we did a couple of years ago, $2,000, which is short term. We had numbers. I know it's 19 days, so you can get this later. I want to know what the effect of the raise was on an unusually high turnover rate you had prior to the raise. Let's see, what did the raise do? And after you've had a chance to get your sea legs under you, I wish you would let us know what are your plans to improve upon turnover and to do some things that have been high profile that points the finger at corrections officers. Give us a plan.
All right, and I can address some of that right now. I think, looking at especially our turnover rate amongst correctional officers has decreased. Our FY 2022 turnover rate for correctional officers sits around 47%. And for our all security is about 39%. But we have seen an increase. We have seen a number of, we're not losing as many correctional officers as we were, so that the raise is helping out a lot. So just to kind of put it in context, for simple terms, we were gaining 100 correctional officers, we were losing 102. Now we're netting. We have one of the largest classes since the pandemic currently inside. They're going through training right now. So since July, about a few months ago, we were sitting at a high vacancy rate, still high, but vacant positions in our COs, but we're netting, since July, we're netting about 270 positions. So we're not losing nearly as many as we were losing before the pay raises. And this $2,000 is definitely going to continue to help. And then also, and to your second point, yeah, we do have a tough mission. We have, a lot of stuff that's going on in the press. I think a lot of things that we can do to try to combat a lot of that stuff is through technology. I'm committed to technology, to making sure that we're ensuring the safety of not only the officers but the offenders as well. And I think once we get that technology in place, we increase our staffing. We see that number going up. We have our recruitment efforts going up. Some people have contacted me and said they saw our commercials running during the national championship, and so I think we're seeing those numbers go up. So we get more officers in, not lose more officers, increase our technology. I think we're starting to make a dent in what you're seeing out there in the media.
Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for bringing your dedicated staff members here today with you.
Take good care of me.
Maybe on a positive note, could you give us an update on how many inmates have enrolled into the diesel and the welding classes to become a productive citizen?
Yes, sir. And if Jay said, do you have that information now?
Jay, if you don't mind grabbing, if Steve will lend you his mic or walk up, just so I can hear you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to get that for you. Our welding program's huge. We've got probably about a half a dozen welding programs across the state, and we work closely with our technical school partners to crank out some graduates. And so I do not have that exact number, but I will get it for you.
Representative Hughley, you can close this out with the last question. Oh, Holcomb, sorry. Had the wrong one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions. The first is for the CO3 proposed position, what would be the starting salary for that?
Somewhere around the tune of about 48,000. 48,000.
Okay, thank you. And then the second, I want to drill down a little bit into the increases on the medical costs. Can you give us some context? There's an add of more than $12 million for this year and then doubling of over $25 million for next year. Can you give us more context as to what's going on there?
Yeah, so the 12 million is just for the amended, and then we're annualizing that in the fiscal year. But that's to kind of make up we're expanding mental health access across the whole state, or medical and physical health. But also in that contract with that provider, they're bringing in all of their equipment as well. So we're not paying for the equipment, and maybe and electronic health records is a big part of that as well. So we're going away from the antiquated paper health records that we have to, just going to electronic health records, and that's a big part of that cost as well.
Okay. So these are enhancements to the existing contracts. As I understand it, all of the health care is outsourced now, correct?
That's correct. Yes, we outsource the physical health care and pharmacy contracts. We saved money by outsourcing the pharmacy contract, but the physical health contract was more than what we were previously paying due to the fact that, as the commissioner stated, they are bringing their own equipment, so we can hold them accountable for their performance. They also implemented the EHR program, and so that cost us some more. The cost model is much more stable than it used to be. So it's now very predictable, and you don't have the big swings we were having in the past. And then the mental health contract, we went from 9 locations. All 35 locations now have a medical health treatment footprint, and so that increased the mental health contract as well.
Okay. Is it fair to say that's a new contract?
No, it's the same mental health contract. We just expanded.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Oliver. Representative Al Williams, your question, and the Commissioner Oliver doesn't know it, but I've been really drilling down in his agency and looking at the turnover, and he is seeing a small improvement, which is not saying a lot really, but I mean, I do think that some of the salary adjustments we have made have improved, but I think we have room for more improvement. So I want to say I look forward to working with you on and all of your team and helping get you over the horizon and get things going great. So look forward to working with you.
Appreciate it.
We'll move on to our next, which is the director of the GBI, Michael Register.
Did you have anything for here? We did. We sent it over. Sent it over. Let's see. The only things I received. Connie, do you have a thumb drive? Do you have a thumb drive?
I do have a thumb drive. You need that?
He said that. That's what we. Yeah, I don't believe we got anything from you.
All right, members, we're going to try to keep going.
Okay. This was the only other one I had.
If you have any other conversations, if you don't mind taking them to the back of the room or out into the hallway. Director Register, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We're going to turn the podium over to you.
We're trying to get set up. Well, thank you, sir, and Senator Tillery and Representative Hachett, the chairs, and the other members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for having me this morning and to have this conversation. It's my first time, so be gentle. Okay. With the GBI, we're currently doing an organizational realignment, and in that realignment, we're relooking our mission statement, also creating a vision statement for the future, and also core values to unify the GBI and make it a more professionalized organization, more effective. I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have at the GBI. The first challenge is to maintain an appropriate staffing in critical skilled areas. As you know, the GBI's mission is very complex with advanced training and degrees required in many areas. And you know, when you look at the efforts that we put in trying to recruit, we expend a lot of money on our recruiting, but it's nothing compared to the money invested in individuals when we hire them and we train them. And so when you look at these attrition rates and we compare them from FY21 to FY22, overall as an agency, now this does include retirements, voluntary separation, and voluntary separations. We're seeing about a 29% increase. But when we drill down a little further with our more scientific and specialized areas like crime lab attrition, when we compare that in FY21 and FY22, we saw an increase in attrition at 7.6%. You know, I said that this includes our retirements, but one area of concern when we look at the people that we hire and we train and then leave the GBI, one thing is concerning is that the largest population of that is individuals that have worked at the agency 1 to 5 years, just in time to be fully trained, get some experience, and then they move on. We've got to find ways to stop that and recruit the brightest and retain the brightest. We look at challenge 2, workforce and infrastructure expansion. You know, as we look at the mission of the GBI and how it has increased, and we'll talk about that in later slides, but just the volume of what we do. For instance, in FY22, the GBI conducted over 7,000 investigations. Child exploitation cases increased over 18% since FY21. Our forensic division fielded over 110,000 requests in FY22. And also our officer-involved shooting investigations increased by 12%. And again, we'll talk specifically about the investigative division and officer-involved shootings a little later. But as our workforce expands, so does the resources needed and also the infrastructure needed to house a larger workforce. And then a third challenge is our reduction of revenue collections. Because of the reduction of user fee revenue collections that we're experiencing at this time, a significant deficit is projected. Now, we're still working with OPD on this, and it still remains fluid. And we're trying to project just what that impact will be. And also our technology updates is another challenge. Almost every technology helps us be more effective, more efficient, but also almost every crime that we investigate, there is some type of technology involved. And we have to have the adequate technology capabilities in order to interrogate the nefarious technology and how it's being used to extract information. Give you our FY23 updates. You'll see personnel. I want to thank you, legislative body and the governor. You approved 69 positions to address gang and intelligent mission priorities. Also assist in addressing our forensic backlog and also our medical examiner office issues. Of the 69 positions, we fill 62. The remaining positions is 4 medical examiner positions that are still open, but the good news there, as you see, is that we believe that we are going to have 3 medical examiners join the agency in July of this year. So that's going to be a great thing, and it's going to help with the backlog. And I want to talk a little bit more about the medical examiner issue later. Our 2 death investigator specialists, they're in the background phase, and the 1 HR generalist is in a recruitment phase. This is our 3rd iteration trying to find the right person to be that HR generalist. Not only do they have to have the requisite skills, but they have to pass a pretty stringent background. Forensic scientific services, one of the things that you did was give us money for outsourcing because we believed that that would help the backlog. And you can see that we outsourced 2,543 chemistry tests this past year and 123 firearms tests. And then also you gave us funding for training new firearms scientists. And what this did is it helped us bring an outside vendor in to train individuals in our ballistics section, and that took the workload off the scientists that are there. Instead of trying to do the training themselves, they can concentrate on addressing the backlog. Facilities, the $1.1 million, that was to harden the GBI headquarters with blast film and also ballistic glass for the windows. And then our bond projects, the construction of a new Region 1 in Calhoun, that's going to begin in the spring of this year. And our design funds for the expansion of the GBI Medical Examiner's Office, we're in the design phase as we speak. You can see the statewide changes that the governor approved. Also, our regional investigative services, as we said previously in some of our challenges about technology updates, well, this certainly gives us the ability to update our case management system, which is approximately 20 years old. And you'll also see our bond projects that were approved by the governor, medical examiner equipment. That's going to assist using technology to address some of the issues that are occurring, and also our crime scene investigation equipment, updating that and getting new and modern equipment certainly will help in that area. I want to talk a little bit about our level of effort. Specifically, the medical examiner's office, the division of forensic science, and our investigative division. When you look at the medical examiner's office, you can see that the caseload is consistently growing. On the left, you'll see our total caseload by year. That's exams actually done in the blue, and then consultations that our medical examiners do, either to determine if an exam needs to occur or if an exam occurred outside the GBI's purview. Sometimes we're asked to come in and consult on that. But on the right, this is a very important figure. You know, when we look at calendar year 2022, we did almost 5,000 exams or autopsies. And currently, we have 19 authorized positions. We only have 9 of them filled as a medical examiner. That leaves 10 open positions, and if we can get 3 medical examiners hired in July, that'll still leave 7. We are accredited. The medical examiner's office is accredited by the National Association of Medical Examiners, and they state in their accreditation that medical examiners' offices, each medical examiner will conduct no more than 250 exams per year. Well, we're far exceeding that. We're actually close to 400 per medical examiner, and our accreditation has been downgraded. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing about that. We're not just sitting idly by and waiting for people to sign up. First, you got to understand that certified medical examiners, there's a very low number in the United States. The openings for medical examiners exceed the number of certified medical examiners in the United States. And so one thing that we're doing is a visa sponsorship. If we can't find them in the United States, maybe we can go outside. So that's underway as we speak. Also, we investigated the problem in other areas of the country, and a couple of ME offices are using physician's assistants to come in and do very basic exams when a very basic exam is needed under the direction of a medical examiner. So we're actually going to hire a PA and do a proof of concept to see how that works. Another thing is technology. With funding that you approved, we actually have purchased CT scanners and also a Lodox, updating our Lodox machine, and that technology hopefully will give us the ability to expedite some of our exams. When you look at all of the autopsies that were done last year, about a third of them were drug overdoses. You know, of course, we've seen about over a 600% increase in confiscated fentanyl throughout Georgia. And we've also, in the overdose deaths, we've seen about a 215% increase in polysubstances, where one drug was mixed with another. A lot of times it's fentanyl. But we would use the technology to scan the body to make sure that there's no trauma there or anything that we missed. Also, we have a stipend for the medical examiners in Macon that makes it more attractive. We would like in the future to have that location stipend to include Pooler. And also to handle the backlog, we're addressing this with a prioritization matrix. Talked to Dr. Smith. When we have an exam where there's an in-custody death, officer involved shooting an infant or a child, or if there's a religious or military aspect to it that's time sensitive, we try to put them to the front. But we continue to work with each and every one on a case-by-case basis. Our crime lab request for service, like I had stated earlier, it averages about 110,000 plus per year. But what I wanted to show you, even with the backlog, we're still working very hard, diligently each day, because not only are we receiving, but you can see we're almost putting out the number of test requests that are coming in. The problem is that the backlog, we try to catch up. Our crime lab backlog, specifically, when you look at all the elements of testing that are requested, you'll find that there's 3 main areas. 93% of the backlog is in chemistry, forensic biology, and firearms. Thus, if you remember our earlier slide where we were outsourcing the chemistry because of this is our greatest backlog. And firearms, I think we did over 2,000 for the chemistry and 123 for the firearms. And then again, 72% of the firearms are listed as priority because whenever you have a handgun that comes in, it needs to be tested for a homicide or an officer-involved shooting, it automatically goes to the front of the line because of the time restraints where we try to complete those investigations. Currently, as of January 17th, we're 42,585 requests as our backlog right now. That's the totality, not just one in one area. You look at what we did in calendar year 22 with criminal street gang activities in Georgia. Remember the resources you gave us last year are approved, and we hired those positions. We certainly are using them. Our gang-related investigations opened 317 cases. That's a 17% increase from 2021. 329 suspects arrested, a 22% increase from 2021, and that also included 108 criminal street gang act charges, 27 firearms seized, $8.6 million in various contraband. But when you look at the cases we're making that involve gangs, you can see they're very serious. Everything from homicide, firearms violations, assaults, drug trafficking, human trafficking, fugitives from justice, and even fraud, white-collar crimes. Our officer-involved shootings and use of force, you can see that other than a couple of years, they're steadily increased. In 2022, we finished with a total use of force to include officer-involved shootings of 140. But if we drill down on that and just look at our officer-involved shootings in the second column from the left, you'll see that we did 112. The year prior to that, last year was 2022, and 2021 we did 100, so it's a 12% increase in officer-involved shootings. And one thing to take away from officer-involved shootings is one of the most emotional investigations that we can do. From an agency standpoint and from a community citizen standpoint. And so we really do a lot of due diligence in our investigations. Somewhere around 195 investigative hours go into each and every one of these officer-involved shootings, some a little more if it's very complex. And then when you look at the population, just some food for thought or just to visualize. In 2010, you see how the population has grown from 2010 to now. In 2010, we had 250 authorized agents. Of course, that decreased a little, but between 2010 and today at 305, we've added 55 agents. That's about 4.2 agents per year. And that's important because we're really trying to do a strategic plan to look at our workload analysis and predict where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years and what's that workforce need to look like in a variety of ways, because the demand continually increases and we've got to maintain the capacity to meet that demand in order to continue to put out quality services as an agency. And with that, I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director. We'll start off with Chairman Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director, for the great work you and the GBI are doing each and every day to protect and serve us.
Thank you, sir.
When it comes to retaining the top talent, you mentioned the cost that we incur as a state to train these individuals, and it is my understanding oftentimes that our federal counterparts will then take those fully trained agents and move them into those ranks. Do you know where we stand, and if not today, perhaps during some of the subcommittee meetings, on our pay scale versus federal agencies as well as other states around us?
I could get more information and do a comparison for you, sir, because to give you a true answer. But we do see that our federal partners do pay more. We have a lot of our scientists leaving, going to work for DOD, you know, as a civilian. And so it's a perplexing matter to try to address the retention when you don't have the pay and benefits that the competitor has.
Representative Mathis.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Director Register. I just want to kind of focus a little bit on the crime lab a little bit. I'm well aware that we have the backlogs that we do, sometimes in excess of 100 to 140 cases that we're counties or to bring in. They have to hold loved ones out that have been a victim of an accident or shooting or whatever. And that takes days to do that. And I appreciate you so much trying to address this problem. Not only not having the regional crime labs fully staffed, it's costing counties money in transportation and pickup and removal of after the examination is complete. So I feel like we need to address these things for multiple reasons. The moral issue of making sure we get folks back where people can grieve and get through closure and those type of things. The other is to make sure that we look after counties that do struggle and don't put excess cost on them. And also getting back the information so we can get death certificates. Families have to have those to do insurance, do things. Some of them have to do for loved one's retirement or some things like that. So I appreciate and I applaud you and hope that we can help you get these fundings. Now, I am aware that we've talked about this over the last couple of years about being able to hire medical examiners to do examinations. I understand that so much. And I know it's hard to compete with the private sector, and I know we've lost a lot of them. We lost some great ones over the years that I've worked with for over 40 years at the crime lab in Atlanta around the state. So it's a great thing. So I do want to mention one other thing that concerns me. We got 159 counties. We got 4 counties that got medical examiner offices. That's Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, and Gwinnett. So that leaves 154 counties with coroners. Now, you know the math didn't add up. So there's one county that doesn't have either. They have a contracted coroner's medical examiner's office, and that's Clayton. Now, the state of Georgia has done a lot to help Clayton over the years. For years, they didn't have either, and the GBI out of Atlanta took these cases for Clayton County. So what I want to ask you to do is to press Clayton to either be a medical examiner county or either be a coroner county. And that needs to be done as quickly as possible because we've talked about that at Gypstick. And I would appreciate that, and I'm sorry I took a little longer than I needed to. But thank you so much, and anything I can help you with, you let me know.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Director, OCGA and 35-3-153, and it states, it shall be the duty of the chief medical examiner to.
Senator Lucas, we can't hear you. Yeah, thank you.
OCGA 35-3-153. In it says, it shall be the duty of the chief medical examiner to establish death investigation regions throughout the state and establish policies concerning the requirements for appointment of regional medical examiners to oversee death investigation activities in each established region. Now, for the last 2 years, we've tried to work. We put money in the budget. We looked at the crime lab in Mill, Georgia, and our examiner retired. And we, as this point, have not been able to get a medical examiner. I'm tired of getting calls in the middle of the night by funeral home directors telling me that they can't close the death of a person because they can't get a death certificate. It's a homicide that has to be an investigation. Would you be willing to sit down with me and the chairman of the Senate Appropriations and see if we as a state can get this thing worked out?
Certainly. My staff and I would be glad to sit down with you and look at any solution that could address the problem. Certainly.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Register, I appreciate your hard work, and first, I want to thank you for including through the CJ or for the CJCC, but under your budget, an individual to monitor the sexual assault kit tracking system. So I think that's very important, and all the feedback that I'm receiving so far is that it's working and is being very helpful. And with that, what I want to drill down into just a little bit more is on the backlog issue. It's an area where I think the General Assembly has added more funds over the last few years because of the concern about the timeliness of testing and processing information. And from my own perspective, I'm particularly concerned about that still with our sexual assault kits, because the identification of an individual, the timeliness of that could potentially prevent an additional sexual assault, but also for firearms. And so with that, what can we do to help to at least get the baseline being that for those where we're trying to identify individuals, we can have that be as close to being real time as possible, or is that not possible?
Well, I'll tell you that we do work with our law enforcement partners on a daily basis when they feel that we had a chief a couple of weeks ago that had an issue and wanted to try to expedite to try to identify if a crime had occurred and who did it, and we certainly we're always open to work with our local partners. We're trying to address all the issues that you brought up with the outsourcing, putting priorities on certain crimes when they come in. And again, to answer the question, the training for our individuals that conduct these tests, they come in, they have to have certain prerequisites and degrees, but the training within the GBI is anywhere from 18 months to 24 months, for instance, for ballistics. And when we are having retention issues for individuals that we hire in that 1 to 5 year period, that certainly is going to impact the overall mission. But we're cognizant of your concerns, and trust me, my staff and I are working diligently to try to find solutions for that.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate the time. You have some very complex issues to handle, and we're aware of that, and we wish you much success and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Colleagues, sorry, we were way behind already. We were ahead, but we were way behind. So if Colonel Wright would come on down, we'll hear from him. I got one, yeah. Colonel Wright, thank you for being here, and colleagues, I'm going to turn the mic over to Chairman Albers. Chairman Albers.
Thank you. If I could ask everybody to please stand and offer a moment of silence and prayer and support for our trooper that was shot yesterday, that has been through surgery. We'll have many more. Pray for his healing, for his wife, and for his children, family, and community, and all the members who are serving us. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Albers. Colonel Wright, you know our thoughts and prayers have been with all your staff over the last day and always are. We know you're in the line of duty and face it every day, and we appreciate everything y'all do. And with that, we will turn the floor over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to the legislators, the governor, the lieutenant governor, Speaker of the House. We received numerous phone calls and texts yesterday from many of you, and we certainly are very appreciative. His family is very appreciative, so if y'all just continue to keep him in your prayers. He's doing well this morning, as can be expected. He's still in ICU. He was able to write the doctor a note last night and tell him that he was having difficulty breathing. He's going to have another surgery this morning, but we're certainly hopeful for a recovery. So thank y'all. Mr. Chairman, it's an honor for us to be here with you this morning for us to speak on behalf of the Department of Public Safety. With me this morning I have Lieutenant Colonel Billy Hitchens, who's the Deputy Commissioner, Ms. Lori Smith, who is our Chief Financial Officer, Lieutenant Vince Mooney, who is our Legislative Liaison, and Lieutenant Brian Screws, who's our Director of Communications. Each member of this agency has worked extremely hard to build meaningful and lasting relationships throughout our state. The positive interactions our employees make every single day pay huge dividends for our agency, our state, and the law enforcement community as a whole. We expect our members to be leaders in their communities and leaders in the law enforcement profession. The events over the last 3 years have challenged our agency as they have challenged our profession. Our employees, though, have exceeded every expectation and stayed the course to ensure resolve. While many people were teleworking during the pandemic, our people were delivering PPE, answering executive order calls, assembling ventilators, and delivering life-saving medicine across this state. Throughout the pandemic, troopers and DPS officers continued to enforce state law, and as we saw a surge in traffic fatalities and crime in this state. Additionally, DPS and state law enforcement responded to protests and civil unrest around the state, specifically here in the Atlanta metro area. Because of the governor's leadership and the coordination between state law enforcement, we were able to prevent violence that was experienced in many areas across this country. The election cycle also brought civil unrest to our state, which created additional security concerns. We increased our personnel, added patrols to ensure people were safe, and to ensure our state property was protected. As we do with any natural disaster, DPS has responded to tropical storms, tornado-ravaged areas throughout the state, as well as snow and ice storms. From transporting elderly after a nursing home lost power during an ice storm, to transporting and reuniting kids with their parents after the tornado damage had them separated, our members are always poised to respond to communities across our state when a crisis strikes. Most recently, during an active shooter hoax, DPS personnel were some of the very first law enforcement officers to enter schools across this state. Since April of 2021, DPS has been the lead state agency in helping combat crime in the metro Atlanta area, as well as other municipalities across our state when they have asked for our assistance. We've spent about $3.5 million of the $5 million that the governor gave us for that mission. All of this was accomplished while continuing our normal responsibilities and routine duties. I'd like to share with you some of the numbers that we generated just here in the Atlanta metro area since we began those crime suppression details. Troopers have stopped almost 41,000 vehicles here in the city of Atlanta. During those traffic stops, they were involved in 922 pursuits just here in the city of Atlanta. They also apprehended 710 wanted fugitives. 32 of those wanted fugitives have been wanted murder suspects. They've removed 551 weapons from the streets. They've also recovered 543 stolen vehicles. Those vehicles have an estimated value of about $11.3 million. So there's been a tremendous amount of work that has been done right here in the city of Atlanta since those operations began. During the fiscal year 23 budget process, DPS was very grateful for the statewide cost of living adjustments to employees for salaries. During fiscal year 23, we received funding in the Capitol Police Division for a $1,000 annual supplement that was implemented in April 2022. In field services and motor care compliance, right here in Troop C, we received a 10% salary supplement that was implemented in April 2022, and that was to help us be more competitive with the metro agencies. DPS also received funds for our SWAT unit. We implemented a 10% salary supplement and took steps to increase our manpower on the SWAT team. On April 1st, we had 25 SWAT members. As of today, we now have 31 troopers assigned to the SWAT team. Operationally, in fiscal year 23, we received funds in the budget for a 75-person trooper school. We currently have 2 trooper schools that are in session. The 113th trooper school will graduate in March with 33 new troopers to hit the road. The 114th trooper school started this past Sunday with 55 cadets, and we currently have 51 cadets, and that class looks really good. We also received an increase in funds for fuel expenses in 23 for the amount of $750,000 in field operations. We're on track to spend about $2.5 million above last year's expense, so we're very confident that we will use that $750,000 in fuel expenses. With the additional funds provided for the Office of Public Safety Support, we hired 2 additional peer counselors and 1 new social worker. We also paid all of those one-time expenses, and we had enough money to allow us to conduct an additional post-critical incident seminar. And this is not part of fiscal year 23 project, but this is a major project that we were very grateful for from the governor and all of y'all, and that was the fiscal year 21 project for a new headquarters construction. That construction is almost complete. It looks like they'll be done with it in March, and we look forward to having a grand opening and inviting all of y'all over, and we're very appreciative of that project. Now I'd like to move on to the governor's proposed budget recommendations for amended fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. For amended fiscal year 23, using the governor's budget book, the Department of Public Safety starts on page 291, Mr. Chairman. On page 292, in field offices and services, we support and appreciate the governor's 2 recommendations. The first is for $30.3 million to procure and complete a new statewide radio system. Through our analysis and the recommendations of OPB, we think the one-time funds can achieve a statewide solution. Communications is the lifeline of our troopers, motor carrier officers, Capitol Police, and Department of Natural Resource Rangers across the state. Our current radio platform limits communication by troop and in many cases by post. Many of y'all are aware we've talked about this issue in the past. Our technology is very antiquated. Looking at field offices and services, line 2, we support the governor's amended fiscal year 23 recommendation for 10 additional K-9s. K-9s are an added resource and a partner for our troopers and our officers. We currently have 30 trained K-9s with 8 additional dual-purpose K-9s in the training process right now. For the fiscal year 24 budget, we support all of the governor's statewide adjustments, including the $2,000 cost of living increase for our employees. Under field offices and services on line 5, you will see a reduction in field offices and services in the amount of $11.6 million. Based on this recommendation, DPS will create a new program for law enforcement training in fiscal year 24. These funds will be transferred to the new program for the purpose of tracking trooper school training. By creating a new program, this will allow DPS to better track the cost of cadet training throughout the year. In this program, the salaries of the cadets and the training expenses will be tracked. Because this is a new program, we plan to work very closely with OPB during the budget development for the next cycle to determine the needs for the newly created program. On line 6, there is $2 million added for the ongoing service contracts for equipment associated with a new statewide radio system the governor has recommended in amended fiscal year 23. We anticipate an annual maintenance cost of $2 million each fiscal year. On line 7, you'll see the same governor's recommendation for 10 additional K-9s in fiscal year 24. Moving to law enforcement training line 1, this is the new program that we've already mentioned for the $11.6 million for the new program for the purpose of tracking trooper school training. Finally, Mr. Chairman, we move to our fiscal year 24 bond recommendations totaling $30 million. The Department of Public Safety bonds can be found on page 382. We support the $13.3 million to replace 223 vehicles. This allows us to replace vehicles when they are projected to reach their life expectancy at 130,000 miles. As in the past, we appreciate the governor's and legislative support of $750,000 in funds for major maintenance and repair for our facilities statewide. We benefit from this MMR annually to upkeep our 89 facilities across the state. We support the $655,000 for radio tower maintenance. While we're procuring a new system in amended fiscal year 23, this will allow us to continue the maintenance on our existing 33 DPS-owned towers. We anticipate having a dual system for a period of time until the new system is fully functional. We also support the $115,000 in FF&E needed for the new post construction in Worth County. And finally, we support the governor's recommendation of $13.4 million for helicopters. And this will allow us to add a Bell 412 to our fleet and replace 2 of our aged helicopters with Bell 407s. And lastly, we support the governor's recommendation for the construction of Post 32 in Oconee County of $1.8 million. And just in closing, as the command staff, we appreciate the contributions of each of our employees, and we recognize that they are our most valuable resource. Without them, there is no Department of Public Safety. We are committed to rewarding and recognizing them for their sacrifices, but we are struggling to retain and recruit employees. The danger associated with the law enforcement profession has escalated, as was demonstrated yesterday, to a level where the pay is no longer commensurate with the ever-increasing job responsibilities on law enforcement. Frontline law enforcement officers put their lives on the line under rapidly evolving situations, face potential prosecution and unending scrutiny on circumstances they're presented. Our agency has proudly served and protected during one of the most difficult times witnessed in modern history. Our goal is to be the safest state for our citizens, but unfortunately, recruiting and retaining employees is making this a challenging feat. This is a difficult and dangerous job, and it grows more dangerous as manpower diminishes. This is affecting law enforcement across the spectrum. But the divisions most impacted are those on the front lines, stopping vehicles with unknown suspects, confronting criminal behavior, dealing with rapidly evolving situations where life and death decisions must be made in milliseconds. Frontline officers deal with the absolute worst of humanity. They see bruised and battered victims of violence. They see mangled bodies in traffic crashes, and they have violent confrontations with evil. I am proud of the men and women of our agency. They are compassionate, they're professional, and they continue to show up each and every day, and they do an exemplary job. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation this morning, and I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Colonel. You do have a couple of questions. Chairman Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Wright, we had the opportunity this summer to talk about compensation for law enforcement officers and how that restrains your ability to recruit and maintain the professionalism of your staff. Would you please share with us more about starting salaries for compensation for your officers and how they move forward as they stay, and then talk about a little bit about retirement and how in the past that had been an incentive for our officers, and that's no longer keeping pace with today's inflationary environment.
Yes, sir. Well, obviously, as far as salaries go, we currently are ranked number 37th in the nation when it comes to state patrol salaries in comparison. That is down considerably. We were up to number 25 back in 2017 after the 20% pay increase. When we had that hearing just 3 months ago, we were at number 35, so we've already dropped to number 37. And that just shows you how competitive the law enforcement market is right now. It's very competitive because it is very difficult to find people who want to do the job that I just described. Young people are they're not interested in it. They're not interested in it because they can telework from home and make six-figure salaries. They can drive a commercial vehicle from point A to point B, work Monday through Friday, and make a six-figure salary. This is a dangerous profession, and the salary has got to match that danger and that job responsibility. When we talk about retirement, the current retirement system is portable. That's the problem with it. It's a 401k portable retirement. Someone can come on to our agency for 5 years, and that retirement and everything that they invest and that the state invests is portable. They can take that money and go somewhere else. They can go to the federal government. They can go anywhere and take that 401k with them. So it's portable. It doesn't anchor anyone here with the state anymore. When years ago, when Colonel Hitchens was on, and we've heard him talk about it before in subcommittees, that anchored employees. That was an appealing thing for people to want to come to the State Patrol because the salary may not have been great, but they knew they were going to have a good nest egg when they went into retirement.
May I have a follow-up? Thank you. When we had those hearings discussing about compensation for law enforcement, one of the first things we had was one of the instructors for the Law Enforcement Academy at South Georgia Technical College, and then he compared the salaries of law enforcement with some of the other career opportunities, as we discussed earlier, welding, CDL, and so forth, heating and air, and they did not compare favorably. Is there any target that you think that would help us to raise the rank from number 37 to even more midway?
Well, I can tell you this, in part of the packet we provided y'all, and Vince has a copy for anybody that wants to share, that would like to have it. It has some of this statistical information about our agency, and it also has some of those rankings. And I'll just give you an example. Kentucky, which is, I consider, a southern state, has raised their starting salary to about a little over $61,000. That's starting salary. So it'll be interesting to see how that helps them with recruiting. But all the states around us are having this very conversation with their legislative body right now because everyone is having this same issue of recruiting and retaining people. And one of the difficulties with our profession is we can't just advertise for these positions and them have on-the-job training for 2 weeks and we give them a gun and give them a car and give them a badge and they go to work like you can with most normal professions. It's not easy like that, and that's hard for people who don't do this job to understand. This profession takes time. It takes a lot of training. There's a lot of skill that's got to be. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of danger in it. So there's got to be a lot of decision making. It takes us 7 months just to get somebody through the school, and that person's going to come out green. They have all the training, but they haven't applied it yet. So once they hit the road by themselves, it's going to take time for them to really hone those skills and really be able to do this job well. So that's the difficulty. It's not where we can just advertise these positions and then fill them, in 2 or 3 weeks. It takes time. People have to be vetted. They can't just come to work for us without being vetted, because I think we all want quality people. We want people who have good judgment. We want people who have good character, people that we all can trust with a gun and a badge and that level of responsibility. Because this profession has a tremendous amount of responsibility. There's no other profession that has the ability to take someone's life, to take someone's freedom. That's a huge responsibility. So we got to make sure we are getting the right people to do this job.
Thank you, Colonel. We've got 2 more questions. Chairman Collins.
Thank you, Colonel, and all your staff for being here with us today. One of the things I want to ask you is, as far as you losing officer or troopers to other jurisdictions, do you see that happening in the metro Atlanta area? Tremendous amount now that the metro area is raising their salaries and you're losing troopers to the metro area?
We've lost a couple. Most of ours go to federal agencies. Federal agencies, they don't necessarily poach off us, but they have a better retirement, they have better pay. A lot of folks use us and the GBI as a stepping stone to move on to the federal agencies, so we see that a lot. When you talk about pay in comparison with some of the metro areas, I know APD has, the mayor has proposed a 9% pay increase for them. They will probably surpass our starting salary. But when you compare all of the incentives and the experience that some of these local agencies pay someone that comes on with them, that surpasses what we can pay them, because we can't pay people for experience. We can't pay people incentives like a lot of these local agencies can. They have the ability to make these increases and make these changes in their salary adjustment at city and county commission meetings monthly. We get one opportunity a year to be able to do that. And with some of these agencies, when you add in all the incentives and the experience that they're paying for, we're down in the 20s in comparison. Now, when you compare basic salary to basic salary, we're about 6th in the state in comparison. There's about 6 other agencies that are ahead of us. But that's not a real true market to look at. You've got to account for what some of these agencies are paying for on experience and incentives. There's one local agency, you can start with them if you've got experience. You can start out making at $117,000. Start out. So do I anticipate some of our folks, if we don't address salary in this state at the state level and state law enforcement, do I anticipate that? I do anticipate that, because I can tell you this younger generation, they don't have the commitment and the anchor ship, if you will, to stay with an agency. They will chase that dollar and they will move to where the most benefit for them is.
One more follow-up question, if I may. I see that there's a large item to do the radio system, and that's something I think a lot of people have wanted for a long time. Any thought as to whether you're going to incorporate some of the local regional radio systems in with that to save the state some money? Are there any discussions about that?
We haven't had that discussion, but the opportunity is certainly going to be there for locals to be able to participate in that system. Yes, sir.
Representative Donahue.
Chairman, thank you for what you do, for what y'all do every day. I'd like to ask a little question to be explained about the radio and the new system the money's put forward. And I think it's to do a little bit of something on dead zones, problems that you're having, but with the money coming forward with radio towers and everything. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
You said some of the dead zones?
Dead zones, meaning when you lose like a cell phone, you lose contact when you're looking down, you're making a chase or whatever. I'd like to just kind of follow along with how this is going to help you guys.
We do have that issue in many areas of the state, and in many areas of the state, some of our troopers have 2 and 3 radios in their vehicles just so they have the ability to get on another radio and talk to a sheriff's department or a police department. So that is the challenge, and we do have a lot of dead areas around the state with our antiquated system, and some of y'all we've discussed that in the past because many of y'all have rode with troopers and you've seen firsthand some of those dead spots. So it's a tremendous security and safety issue for us. So we hope to rectify that problem.
Colonel, you have successfully answered all the questions.
I appreciate it.
Thank y'all for your time and for your presentation.
Thank y'all for your time.
Thank y'all continually for what you do for the state. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Next up is Commissioner Williams with the Department of Natural Resources. And everybody's leaving. You're running them all off.
Oh, Lord. No.
Just hold on. right, looks like we about got the change of the room out here. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to start off with, I want to extend to Colonel Wright also that the entire DNR family is praying for the trooper. We stand shoulder to shoulder with them, civil unrest, natural disasters, and we're there with them yesterday. And Colonel Wright, just want you to know the entire DNR family is praying for that trooper and his family. We appreciate y'all's service. Chairman and committee members, thank you for inviting me back to present DNR's AFY 23 and FY 24 budget. I'm Mark Williams, Commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources. I'd like to thank Governor Kemp and the legislature for your leadership, which has allowed our state to continue to be in a sound financial position. DNR is here to sustain, protect, and conserve and provide recreational opportunities of Georgia's natural, historic, and cultural resources. Due to your direction, we have been able to reinvest in our 65 parks and historic sites, building new cabins, group shelters, boat and kayak launches to get Georgians out to enjoy this great state. Being able to add to the over 1 million acres of conservation lands in Georgia, DNR has been able to keep the gopher tortoise from being listed as an endangered species by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Because of your guidance, we are able to hire additional game wardens to ensure that all Georgians are protected in the woods and on the water. Thank you again to the legislature and Governor Kemp for your leadership. The Department of Natural Resources AFY 23 and FY 24 budget can be found on pages 260 through 267 of the Governor's budget report. We will start with the AFY 23 budget, which can be found on pages 261 through 262 of the Governor's budget report. DNR has one addition under law enforcement at the bottom of page 261. Recommended change, $4,195,000 for equipment and installation associated with the new statewide public safety radio network to achieve statewide interoperability. This is our game warden's portion of the overall contract. On the FY 24 budget on pages 262 through 264, the department is certainly grateful for the governor's recommendation for a $2,000 cost of living adjustment for full-time benefits eligible employees. This change will certainly have a positive impact on the lives of our employees. In addition, just like all state agencies, each DNR program has budget recommendations to reflect an adjustment to agency premiums for DOAS-administered insurance, programs, and merit system assessment billings. An additional recommended changes in law enforcement are on page 263. Number 4, it's a recommended change for $217,857 for the ongoing service contracts associated with that new statewide public radio system. On page 264, the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program, recommended change is $1,050,961. $1,050,961 added to the base budget to make that trust fund whole. Under Wildlife Resources Division, page 264, there's a recommended change, $24,945 reduction to the Wildlife Endowment Trust Fund to reflect FY 2022 collections. We have been in touch with OPB, Mr. Chairman, regarding this figure. Due to a difference in reporting tools, there should be an addition of $27,470, not a reduction. We didn't have a decrease in lifetime sales. It was an accounting adjustment we needed to make. And then there's one yes item to utilize the existing wildlife investment trust funds for fish hatchery renovations, wildlife management maintenance, shops construction, and other management activities. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to take any questions, or do you want Director Dunn to come up, or at this point?
We do have some questions right now. Chairman Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not so much a question in regards to budget, but I want to publicly thank the commissioner along with the entire governor's office, and especially DNR. I didn't get a chance with our public safety officials, but with the tornado that happened last week, a matter of minutes, I was on the phone with the commissioner, and I can't tell you, not only to DNR and the resources they sent to our community, but all of the resources from the state, and I can't thank you enough for the response. And on behalf of the folks from Spalding, Griffin, Spalding County, really appreciate what you did, and the contact that you had with not only me but our delegation, and making sure that the resources were there. As y'all, I know the next day y'all were looking for people. Y'all were out in areas where they were actually looking for people. So I just want to publicly say thank you, not only to DNR, but all of the Georgia resources that were put to Griffin, Spalding County, and what y'all did in this devastating time.
Thank you, Chairman Knight. And I know the community's got a long way to go, but I want to echo a thanks to my employees on the ground at daylight in Griffin the morning after. Worked for 2 days tirelessly there. Not only my law enforcement section, I have Colonel Bernard with me, but our wildlife resources section. Where biologists take off their brown shirt and put on an orange shirt and grab a chainsaw, we're uniquely equipped to help in that, and my folks love serving their citizens, and so I want to publicly thank my employees as well for the response they had there. Thank you.
Chairman Lynn Smith.
Thank you, right in front of you. And I wish to second what Chairman Knight said. You were available to us as all the other state resources when the tornadoes hit and devastated a large part of Coweta. And to that point, is it not true that you're one of the state agencies that seems to be the glue that gets put in lots of places around our state? So I thank you for that. And then to point out that the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act is a phenomenal gift by the citizens of Georgia to our natural resources. So thank you for administering that. And then finally, could you point out to the committee the role a lot of times of our game wardens, that they are solo operators as opposed to working in teams, and how important this radio communication is?
Thank you. I think Colonel Bernard would echo that. This statewide connecting us all is going to be huge for us, and we don't want any more tornadoes. But my folks really get on the ground and get after it. And again, we're uniquely qualified to do that, and we love doing it. On the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act, the Board of Trustees met about a week and a half ago, so their project list has been voted out. It goes to my DNR board next Friday at their meeting, and then it'll be coming to the appropriate subcommittees in the House and Senate for their approval. That's where we're at with our project list.
Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to make sure you understand I carried a bill for you called the raccoon bill, and Homer Bryson got me into that. I want to make sure this year we're not going to do anything with the raccoons. The second part is thank you again for everything you do. And I mean that. I tell people all the time that when I come out, I'm safe. When you guys come out, everybody has a gun pretty much. You pull your chainsaws out. You do things to help our communities, and I really do appreciate that. And I do need 20 of your best officers to come out to my farm and shoot 30 people.
Okay. No comment. I see my state senator and my state representative back there that are new, and for other new members that are in here, we will be passing around what I call a cheat sheet just for your district. It'll tell you how many parks you have, who your local game warden is, all our resources that are in your, I call these things refrigerator notes that you can put up somewhere, so you've got a quick little resource as to where our resources are just in your district. So Donald Kirkland, our legislative affairs person, will be getting that out, and we'll get you something where you can get out and visit our parks soon. They're coming.
Commissioner, I want to point out, you just mentioned your state senator is new and your state representative is new. With the budget being before us and all, are you not claiming me anymore?
I'm sorry. We moved to St. Simon.
Oh, that was great.
Still a landowner up there. You'll always be my senator. One of them.
On all those notes, I'll recognize the next question as long as he doesn't mention raccoons or dogs. Representative Al Williams.
Uh-oh. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Donahue introduced it, but I carried it. Two questions. First, a quick update on the oyster farming down off the coast, how we're doing on that. And secondly, we just listened to the Georgia State Patrol and update us on where you stand on salaries. How is it? How's your turnover? And what would you like to see going forward?
Okay, on the oyster farming, we've let leases in McIntosh. That was first. And then Chatham. We're working on Camden. We're still, all our work's done in the two counties, but there's some core permitting that we're still waiting on some of that. But I'm pretty sure McIntosh is through, those first ones, even with their core part. We do have a bill that will be coming to make it a little easier on our oyster farmers. I won't take the time to explain it, but we were charging them by the cage, and we got new technology, and it would have cost them too much. So this will be a reduction in their cost with this piece of legislation, but I'll talk to you about that. On salaries, we have turnover. It's not going to be big numbers. I have about 218 game wardens. I don't have as many employees as DPS, but we do see it. Mostly with our young people, just like Colonel Wright talked about, it's quality of life issues, time off. As a DNR game warden, it's 24/7. I mean, conservation doesn't sleep. It doesn't take weekends off and those type of things. So we are seeing some, we're having turnover, just not as big of numbers, and salary's part of it, and quality of life is probably the biggest part. So we continue to work on that. More game wardens we can put on helps quality of life because it gives more time off. Because our game wardens help civil unrest. We've already talked about the storms and all that. Civil unrest and anything. We stand side by side and with Colonel Wright and our brothers in blue for all those issues. So.
Commissioner, it's all questions. Did you say that Director Dunn had a presentation also?
Yes.
Okay.
MEPD.
Okay. Come on up, Director. I'll just make sure you know you're only thing standing between us and the OPB Director, Kelly Farr, and lunch. So.
Chairman Hatchett, I appreciate that. I know we're in OPB's time. Chairman Tillery, members of the Appropriation Committees, House Representatives, you had three questions, but I'm just going to focus on budget changes, and I'm prepared to talk about anything you want, but I'll just focus on those, and I'll be very, very brief. In terms of the governor's proposed budget, there's no changes for EPD in the amended budget. I should mention EPD has three programs underneath DNR: Environmental Protection, Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, and Solid Waste Trust Fund. So there's no changes in those three programs in the amended budget. In the Big 24 budget, EPD changes start on page 263. We have the COLA as well as the two statewide changes in the Environmental Protection Program. If you move down to the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund program, also on page 263, the line item there aligns the budget with the fees collected from the 75 cents per ton tipping fees at landfills in the state. HB 511 passed in 2021 dedicated these fees to the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. Last year we collected about $17.5 million in tipping fees, and the budget modification, that increase of $9.9 million, basically aligns the base budget with FY22 collections. Similarly, the line item for the Solid Waste Trust Fund program on page 264 aligns budget with fees collected with the $1 tire replacement fees. Last year's collections were $7.66 million, which is roughly $38,000 higher than FY23 base, and you see that adjustment there. Mr. Chairman, that's the budget changes for EPD.
Thank you, Director Dunn. You don't have any questions, and thank you so much for your efficiency in delivering that. We know you had some days at OPB, so you understand.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Really well. Thank you. Also, members, Lieutenant Mooney's in the back. I forgot to mention earlier, if you wanted one of the copies of the PowerPoints that DPS had earlier, he has extra copies back there for you. Our final presentation, the man to wrap it all up.
The best for last.
Who literally knows every number and period in this book.
So y'all get your questions ready.
Director Kelly Farr, Director, I do want to let you know that you already have about 15 questions pending, so good luck.
Can't get it to.
I'm excited.
Sorry,
you just have 3 slides.
There we go.
Y'all ready? All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Tillery, Chairman Hatchett, and members of the Appropriations Committee. I thank you for allowing me to appear before you this morning, but I guess it's finally turned into this afternoon now. I greatly appreciate the opportunity that was provided earlier this week to representatives from our Grants Division, GDAC, and the Office of Health Strategy and Coordination to present and discuss with y'all a lot of the impactful work that they're doing in their own division separately from kind of what core OPB is. I wanted to touch briefly, if you, do I go to the next thing? Left and right. I messed it up. And some people think I know about technology. Sorry, I can just scroll.
Okay.
Scroll down.
Whatever I did, fixed it.
Go right then. There we go. All right. Back to my presentation. I wanted to touch briefly on the changes to OPB's budget last year and in the governor's budget proposal for this year. As you can see from the slide, in AFY 22 and FY 23, changes to OPB's budget consisted of statewide adjustments to fund enterprise changes for retirement, teamworks, and risk pools, along with the $5,000 cost of living adjustment for state employees. We are incredibly thankful to the governor and the General Assembly for approving the pay raise last year. We have seen it go a long way in reducing turnover and improving retention at state agencies. We know that the labor market is tight across the board, both for government as well as the private sector. As some of y'all may have heard from the governor's presentation at Eggs and Issues this week, he mentioned that there are currently 3 jobs for every person in the state of Georgia looking for a job, so 3 for 1. And you know, having this pay raise, it helps us cut down on our recruitment and retention, and it also helps keep a lot of that institutional knowledge as we respond to constituents. As you can see from this next slide, there are no recommendations for OPB in the AFY 23 budget, and like last year, FY 24 only includes adjustments for statewide items. As the governor discussed in his inaugural address, the FY 24 budget proposal provides for our state employees and teachers another $2,000 cost of living adjustment. This basically equates to around a 3% increase over the state's current average salary of approximately $64,000. But we went more with a traditional, like flat dollar amount rather than a percentage, because the flat dollar amount tends to impact the lower paid jobs instead of the higher paid jobs. With this increase, the governor and the General Assembly will have increased average state wages 21% since this first FY 2020 budget. So even with inflation, our employees on average will be better off and more competitively compensated for their important work than they were 4 years ago. I'd also like to draw your attention to the transfer of funds out of OPB to establish our Georgia Data Analytics Center as its own program. The FY 23 budget carved out our Office of Health Strategies and Coordination as a separate program, and the governor is recommending doing the same with GDAC. The General Assembly established GDAC as part of the OPB in FY 2020
to promote data transparency and collaboration across state government. We want to ensure that the budget is transparent in funding for their important work. With that, there are no further changes to present for OPB's budget, so I'm glad to reserve my time for any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Okay, committee, it's your time to ask questions. And
very exciting.
Wow.
Who knew, right?
Wow. There are no questions about the budget? Now, I've gotten a lot. I can't believe they hadn't gotten you, Eddie.
Well, they're waiting for you.
I kind of wanted to make a joke about if even 10% of the text that we've got were now asked in the audience, we may not finish today. But Director Farr, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for your presentation. Appreciate your involvement yesterday as well. Yeah. And with Director Farr's comments, that wraps up our presentations for today. We do want to do a little bit of a brief summary, though, just to remind you some of the things you've seen and heard today. You heard from our governor. You heard what he laid out at the beginning, his priorities for the state that many of us already heard in his inaugural address. The $2,000 pay raise that he suggested for state employees and state teachers. You've seen in his budget a proposal to help shore up our state health benefit plan. Remember, that's $1 billion. You've seen a proposal to return money to from where it came from. Remembering it's not ever our money that we spend. We're always spending other people's money. $1 billion to return on personal income tax, and slightly more than $1 billion to be handed out through a codified system already, the Homeowners Tax Relief Grant, to provide relief to our homeowners in our state who've seen inflated values due to what's been unprecedented federal spending and inflation. I hope you, though, will also focus on what we saw after that, the state liabilities that now stand before us that I just quick jotted down were around $50 billion by the time our presenters stopped. Just the highlights of those, we already talked about $1 billion of it in a state health benefit plan that really wouldn't be a true liability, but we're trying to shore up part of that liability. You heard about our OPEB liabilities that exist out there, about $5.6 billion if you wanted to be completely true to your funds in the ERS system, $21 billion in the teachers' retirement system. Those were just the big numbers. You were here for the rest. I hope you also focus on what you brought to us as the issues to discuss and study next. For many, many months now, many of you in this room have been focused on children and their mental health and their health care, especially when they are our wards. If they are our wards, we are their parents. And what we're going to do and want to do in the coming months to continue to improve their lives and make sure that they're able to help us address future issues over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years, whether it be workforce or it be the ones that they are in this room wearing the gray and blue badges, making the decisions for the next 10, 20, 30, and 50 years for our state. I want to tell you thank you so much for being here, for your attentiveness over the past 3 days. I know these meetings get long, but I was so impressed that you stayed engaged. Your citizens back home should be proud. Our citizens as a whole across the state should be proud. And I just want to tell you personally, I'm proud of you for staying engaged and look forward to working with you over the next few months as we craft a budget that's not only good for the House, it's not only good for the Senate, it's not good for just the rural or good for just the urban, but it focuses on those who are less fortunate, fulfills what I as a Christian believe is our mission to take care of the widows and the orphans, and it leaves Georgia in a better place than we found it. So thank you so much for being here. And Chairman Hatchett, do you have anything else in summary comments?
Amen.
Thank you all for being here. One last comment. Remember that if you are on one of the Health and Human Services Committee meetings, you are welcome back to the joint committee meetings at, I believe, 1:30, and those will be chaired by Chairman Watson and Chairlady Dempsey. Thank you so much.